At the Marie, Coral.
Good morning, 18. Can you hear me? I'm just testing my new earpods. Meredith, can you just speak up so I can hear if I can hear you?
Morena e rangatira, kei te aha.
Katie Pie, but I thought it would go in my ears.
Oh, have you not, you have to, what's it called, like link it, sync your earpods to your computer so it will just go to your ears.
Okay, speak again.
So you have to like,
there we go.
Oh, it's working.
Oh, good. So now I can.
Sandra, look at you. You look like you've got this foggy haze.
You've got a glaze.
You've got a glow here.
You've got a healthy glow. I'm trying this today so my poor family don't need to be quiet all the time because I don't mute on this side. So this is good. But my family, my boys are still fast asleep.
Yes, my son.
They think they're on holiday, massive holiday.
Oh yeah, they're doing better than mine. Mine's sitting directly in my line of sight with his earphones on already in Zoom meetings at school. So
good man.
It's just really glary at my end, in which case I can
No,
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 it's
you're
beautiful.
muted. You've got
You look-
you've got this really hazed kind of like angelic glow.
A healthy glow, which we all wish we had.
Saintly. You look like Saint Sandra.
Oh God, now that's just terrifying. I'm going to go away now.
No, just own it. I mean, Debbie's in kind of this dark, kind of ethereal kind of movement that comes in and out. And Larry does this all the time. I'm intrigued. He wanders his house, I think, looking for the best Wi-Fi. Is that what you get?
Oh, there we go, Larry.
You
Show
always
us
get to
your
see your
dogs
whole house,
again.
Larry.
We saw your dogs and your bed and your everything yesterday.
I'm just going to go and have coffee.
Well,
I'm
my son works obviously at the supermarket, so he's sleeping still because he has a late shift. And my other daughter, she's outside in her room, so to speak. And my husband's in the spa pool.
Oh, lovely. Hey, I just want to, Jill, can you hear me? Because I would love for you, Jill. Let me just see if I can mute Meredith. Let me just see. Yep. Okay. No. Yesterday I wasn't the boss lady, and I didn't really want to mute you, Meredith. I just wanted to practice. Ask to unmute. No, I can't hear no one. Okay, I'm just going to grab my last coffee, and then I'll see you in 4 minutes.
Your last coffee for this 5 minutes?
Yeah, for 5 minutes.
My coffee was made today with full cream milk from a cow. Not sure needing that, but anyway. Joanna Noble looks very noble.
There we go. Thank you for everyone putting their names up beautifully, because I was in a meeting yesterday where, and it's awkward when you're in a meeting and you need to say to people, because, you know, we all know each other and I know your face, but there was a meeting where there was someone called ARH, no picture, just ARH. And I'm like, who? And you don't want to say, excuse me, ARH, speak up now. In the end, I just let it slide, but yeah, we won't just let people into our meetings and sit there if you don't know what they. Okay.
You just have to call them
Yeah. Okay. Let's just wait for everyone. We've got a couple of. Oh, I need to ring Bill. I forgot about that. Bill.
Oh, no.
There we go. He rang me at 7:45 this morning. I just saw that.
I would have been lined up outside Larry's store today, ready to get
Can I ask that someone else ring Bill today? Because I want to use my earpods, I'm going to ask, let's just see. Oh, there's Mr. Josh Farehinga. Mr. Josh Farehinga, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Morena whānau.
Morena, I'm just asking if you can maybe have Bill online. Do people... yes, if you can maybe have Bill, because you've got earphones as well. I'm trying to get Bill on the phone, but I also am trying to work with earpods today. So is there any councillor who has unlimited minutes?
I'll get Bill on, yeah, and I'll sort out the sound stuff on my side. I'll probably be able to make my sound come out both my laptop speakers and also out through here as well.
So
happy to help if you can't do that, Josh, in whatever way I can if it doesn't work. So yeah, cool.
Sweet.
And just also remind me that we take coffee breaks. Not that I need a reminder, but you do. Sometimes you sit in front of your computer and you just do it, versus when we were face to face, we would probably get up more often. Okay, I'll give it 1 more minute. I'm just going to do one final stroll through my house to tell everyone to zip it. There we go.
Bill Burdett is unable to
take your call at the moment. Please leave a message and he will contact you.
Are we all muted for a reason? Are we just in silence?
It's a polite thing to do.
we were playing the silent game. You blew it. Who's the dog?
You lost.
Hey, okay. And maybe it's only me that cares about starting meetings on time. 9:02. What's going on?
Yeah, this is your time.
Hey, I was here before you.
You were. She was.
Because she's still in bed.
Milk from a cow this morning, didn't you, Meredith?
Updating constantly these days.
No one else's spouse is in a spa right now, right?
Oh,
What's a spa?
we are being live streamed this morning, just a reminder.
Don't take us to the spa, Meredith.
I was just about to do that. No, I wouldn't do that. That was only for Tony's, because he's still in bed.
No, you can tell when someone's in bed because the wall's really close behind them.
We should all sing a song to the people watching right now. How many people are
No,
stop.
Oh, we're starting.
Welcome to our world.
Okay, apologies, not sure why I was kicked out. It was probably for bad behavior. Okay, let us go. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our meeting. I'm just checking to see that we have everyone here. I'll put it on gallery so we can see all faces. Good morning, and I will start our morning with a prayer for us. So please join me in prayer. God, thank you for bringing us together today. Thank you that we live in such a beautiful place. We are in uncertain times, not just in Gisborne and Tairawhiti, but also in Aotearoa and the whole world. Please guide us as we make decisions today. Please bless our community in these uncertain times. Help us to help those that need a little bit more help at this stage, and help us today when we make our decisions that we make sure we do it in the best possible way we can. Amen. Okay, let us go. We have a chunky agenda in front of us today. I just want to make sure everyone is here that should be here, because we are going to do apologies. Jill, have you made me the boss lady yet? Let's just see. I'm just trying. Oh, people, apology from Pat. Okay. Bill Burdett is trying to. So, Josh, Bill just rang GDC. I said he should hang up and you should ring him. Do you have him online?
Not yet. The phone is still ringing. I'm waiting for him to pick up. I also received a message from Terry. He's struggling to get into the link, but I've asked him to make contact with Heather. I'm
just going to give us 5 more minutes just to quickly sort out everything, because it is by no fault of their own. It's just a little bit of technology. So let us, while Jill, if you can make me the I also want to tell an apology from Pat, no power, because my internet earlier just kicked out. So just let us know if you have an issue. Just text me if you have an issue. I unfortunately can't always read what's going on in the chat box. There's too much going on. So if you really want me to see something, you will need to text me, because this goes on. Hello. I'm good, thank you, Alan. So if you can, yes, but okay, if you can quickly put him on, that's fine, thank you. Thank you, okay. Uncle Bill? Hi, morning, we're trying to reach you. If you can hang up, because Josh has been ringing and ringing your... In
line.
Okay. You hang up, and then when it rings, it will be Josh. Okay then, kakite. He's a gem. He's rung the desk, he's rung Donna, he's rung Heather, the man that wants to get into this meeting. Okay, Josh, I'll leave it up to you. Let's see if
I have Uncle Bill online. He's here.
Good. Okay. Morning, everyone. Okay, I just want to get all the participants on one side, and then we are ready to go. Okay, good morning. Let's get cracking. So apologies at this stage. I have an apology from Pat. We'll see. I should probably, if someone wants to ring her and ask if she might want to connect by phone as well. That is an option.
Do that if you like.
Okay, you just do that. That would be awesome. Okay, declarations. So at this stage, I'll put Pat down, but she might join us. Any declarations of interest? Let's go to our confidential.
I've got a declaration of interest for the skate park project. Just having approved it through TT, I think that it's.
Thank you for that.
Can I? I'm also part of the Motu catchment. I'm not sure what it's called, advisory panel, I think it's referred to in this, putting together the Motu catchment plan, which is referred to in the wetlands paper.
Thank you for that.
In respect to skate park, I previously said I had a conflict regarding working for it previously. I still stay in touch with that NGO currently working out of the park. So te ora hau, yeah. So the skate park for me is still in the mix, but not in a huge way.
At this stage, I'm happy for all the declarations that was just declared that you do take part in the discussion and the vote. I don't see, but thank you for declaring that. That's very important. Okay, we're going to move on to our non-confidential minutes, which are on page 4. If everyone has had a read of that. Larry. You will have to unmute yourself. Thank you. Are you going to speak up, Larry?
No, I'll move the minutes.
Okay, so we're going to just quickly set down the rules, what we're going to do. I'm just trying to think because I just thought you wanted to speak. So we'll get there.
I'll put my hand up if I want to speak.
Yeah.
You just put your hand up to move it as well.
Yeah.
I have Pat on speakerphone now, so she should be able to hear you. Pat, can you hear everybody?
I can hear you, but I can't really hear the others. I can hear Briette speaking in the background, but I can't really hear what she's saying.
So do what I did yesterday, Sandra. I put Bill like this, just right here by the the top, so you could hear.
Yeah, I can hear that better.
Good. Okay, that's fantastic. Okay, so the minutes have been moved by Councillor Foster, seconded by myself. Any discussions in that regard? If not, we move on to our next set of minutes, which was, why did I think I had 2 sets? Governance work plan, page 9.
Yeah.
Okay, if there are no questions in regard, so what I'm going to ask everyone, it's just easier for me if when you want to speak, you put your little yellow hand up, because that really flashes up onto my screen and it puts you in order. If I'm going to ask that if you want to move something, then you can just put your hand up like this. And when I say all in favor, please do this as well, because it gives me a very good idea of just the visual where we're going. Okay, without further ado, we've got quite a few chunky agenda items. I have received notice from quite a few people and from myself that we're struggling with Wi-Fi and some issues. If you drop off, send me a text, try to get back on. Just alert me, because there's so many online, I won't see when you fall away. But good luck to us all. Let's see if we can make it work. So we're going to move. So we've got 4 chunky reports today, 5 that we're going to talk about. Let's move to our first one, which is on page 10. It's the speed management plan, engagement and recommendations. And Dave, can I see David Wilson? There's no David Wilson at this stage. There he is. David Wilson, I assume you will be the person speaking to this. Larry, just mute yourself. I'm not the boss, Heather. I'm not the boss of this meeting. Okay. David, do you want to speak, or Tina, will you speak to the paper that you wrote?
I'm happy to speak.
Thank you, Tina.
Yeah, so this is basically just feedback from our engagement that we had in April and May, quite a while ago now. This report was meant to go to the June council meeting, but I think the LTP was a bit big, so it's been bumped. But yeah, we've also listed some recommendations. So the feedback that we got was generally they weren't quite keen on the broad brush approach that we had to changing all the speeds in 3 years. So we've spread it out over the 10 years, but we only have to focus on the 3 years. So the 3 years plan that we've got in here is based on that feedback, pretty much, what was supported, which was largely just a few tweaks around the CBD. The city. The CBD was one, and yeah, most of the townships. And we've pushed out engagement consultation to February next year. That's since this engagement, we've also submitted on the Ministry of Transport's speed setting rule, and it looks like they're looking to sign that off or sign off on that rule at the end of this year, based on the feedback that we provide to them. We haven't heard anything much since, but a lot of the stuff that we weren't sure about was consultation. So we didn't want to plough on with consultation before, and in case everything changed, because the minute that they agree to this new rule, it flicks a switch and we can't use the speed setting bylaw anymore, and we have to use the new law. So to err on safety, we would prefer to consult with how it's written in the new rule, and that would be, yeah, after that, hopefully early next year. We've put February, we think.
Thank you for that, Tina. Dave, do you want to add anything? No. Okay, councillors, if there are questions, I'm just going to see, I've got Larry over there. Larry, go for gold. Okay, Larry, you need to unmute yourself. I'm not in charge of the meeting.
Sorry, okay. No, just as page 14, there's a chart there with all the different speed limits, and Makarori Beach is identified as a 20k area. I would like to promote the fact that it should be all beaches, not just Makarori. Tairawhiti Beach is unbelievable. It's got bikes riding up and down here over 50, sometimes 100k. So you know, it's just so dangerous, and there's no there's nothing to really no monitoring to be able to stop that. So if we had a 20k beach limit overall, all our beaches, I think that would be appropriate, and then it would be about a bit easily enforced, particularly by public. So yeah, I would certainly promote the fact that we have 20Ks on all our beaches.
Thank you.
If we're going to have, yeah.
Support that too, Larry, at a minimum.
Yeah, at minimum, yeah.
Was that Pat?
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I'm happy to move the paper because it makes it really clear why the consultation would begin again in February, and just in support of what Councillor Foster said, if all beaches could be included in the consultation when it begins in February, that could be helpful for a number of, in Nara as well, when traffic uses the beach and they disturb birds and dotterels and things like that. So there's been a plea from a number of areas to have limits on beach.
Thank you for that, Pat. We're going to move to Kerry, then Meredith, and then Shannon. Thank you.
So I'm just presuming you said Kerry first and not Terry. It's a bit hard to tell. Cool. Sorry, I'm just trying to manage my question list because it keeps moving. So I like Pat, if you need a seconder, I'm happy to second this. I think it is, it's captured really well the feedback that, as I understand it. I am a little bit worried that by just kind of pushing the rest of the speed management review issues out into further timeframes, that we're not sending a particularly clear message. We're kind of saying, oh yes, we know you don't like this, but we'll just do it further away, which is I mean, I think as a region, our community have said, hey, look, actually, we don't see speed as being an issue in some of these roads. We think that the roads themselves are the issues, and that's come through really, really clearly. The fact that Waka Kotahi hasn't necessarily responded to that, I think it's something we should ask them to respond to. And I think on behalf of our community, we should be signalling that we agree if we agree. If we don't agree, then we should signal that. But to just push it out, I think is, yeah, I think that's not particularly responsible, because we're just going to get to a point at some point where our community and regional transport and our council are going to be at loggerheads. However, in the first tranche, I'm very supportive, especially I've had absolutely nobody in the township say, hey, no, look, we don't want this. In fact, if anything, they're like, how soon can you do this? And so just, I've got a few questions with regards to what we've actually proposed. In particular, given that we have Muriwai School is on a main highway, and obviously that isn't covered by what we would be doing. Do we have the ability to drop that speed limit beyond the, I think it's 80 kilometres an hour that is signalled on the map? My second question is on page 26. We've got the proposed speed limit in Tairawhiti, and obviously there's the speed changes marked. Do we just presume that all of the roads that are not highlighted remain at the current speed? It's just for clarity. And yeah, that's probably those are probably my main points. And also just page 57 is a good example of where it looks as though we're almost adopting too many speeds in quite a small area. It seems as though it could be quite confusing to have so many changes in such a small space. I'm not sure what other people make of that, but I would certainly encourage, I don't know about everyone else, but when I drive around, I find it hard enough to keep track of when the speed limit's changed already for 350 and 60 and 70. Without adding 30 and 40 and 50 and 60 and 70. So whether council, if someone would like to respond to how we manage that challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson, will you be the person to respond, please?
I'll jump in quickly, and if Tina tells me I'm going the wrong way, then I'm sure she'll jump straight in. So when we talk about Moody Wire, we're unable to touch the speed along the state highway. So we have been part of that when the decision was made to drop the speed along Moody Wire, and then also the interchanges when the school with the flashing lights. That was quite a long, drawn-out process with Waka Kotahi even to be able to drop the speed to that stage, and that ended up being challenged, but it did get over the line. When it comes to the multiple speeds around the district, one of the things that we'd say is we already have a number of the different speed changes across the district now. So you can have 40, 50, 60, 70, 30, 100 across the district now. So yes, we know that it is looking at different speeds in different areas, but that's actually quite important when it comes to trying to make those places safer and targeting them for where we can safely bring speeds down or where we can leave them up. So I know it looks like a lot, but I'd say that we do have these now across the district as well.
Just with regards, if you wanted a reference to which one I was talking about, it was Rotoria that I sort of thought looked quite confusing. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different speed limits in one township. And it would be interesting just if the consultation maybe would consider asking, is it easier for you to have broader brush approach with a lower speed limit than to have 4 or 5? Just, I mean, they may say they're quite happy with that number, but just if we could make sure that we canvass that.
Yep, we can do that.
Thank you for that.
Oh, and would someone respond to the query around the pushing essentially what is a disagreement really between what Waka Kotahi are asking, what our community see as pragmatic with regards to the speed management review aspects that we're not taking up in the next 3 years?
We'll do that through the RTC.
Okay.
You serve on the RTC, Kerry, so you'll be well across that.
All right. That's the place for it.
Okay, we move on to Mrs. Meredith Akuaka Brown.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. Mayor. Listen, my concern, obviously, in respect to our region, is we have quite a young populace, and in light of this recent tragic accident in Timaru, I think we need to be really clear around the message, as Kerry has mentioned. Councillor Wilson's right, we have to have an overall clear message because of our populace having a lot of young people who, technically the brain is still developing, and so the wiring is about as risky as one can be. So I'd like to see what an educational kind of strategy, how we could utilise, I guess, our region's had its own share of tragic accidents, so I don't want to highlight Timaru's one because it was heartbreaking, but it's just that we have a similar populace that do very much that similar thing and finding a space to drive very, very fast in parts of region. And so I wondered, have we kind of cornered all the hotspots to this kind of framework of speed, etc. I appreciate the report, so thank you, Tina. Thank you, those who've worked on this, who are working towards speed changing. And I think I kind of have concern about the holding out message, because it takes a while to get humans to follow rules. And it needs to be implemented, constantly reinforced so that people get the message that you've got to slow down. There's parts of region, we've got an aging population, all of those messages. So I just would like to know that whilst I appreciate the work done now, that we are actually acknowledging that we have a young population, aging population, so speed, cars and all the framework of issue, that we are sending a strong message. And so the educational side of this, I'd love to see a real push in schools and driver license spaces to educate the dangers and the necessity to slow down. So I just wondered, where's that sitting? And I know RTC has a full kind of complement of our community at that committee. So is there more conversations around this as far as beaches and other spaces where speed is an issue that can be brought to that attention, to that committee's attention? But I just endorse Kerry's concerns to, don't put it out, because we need to keep the message strong at the outset that slowing down is important for saving lives, but also for being responsible, which is a tough message for youngins, so to speak. So those were just my thoughts regarding the report, and I can second it, but just those thoughts. Kia ora.
Thank you for that. I forgot to say at the beginning of the meeting, just remember we are being live streamed today. Not that it matters, we always behave in impeccable ways, but I just wanted to let you know we are being live streamed as we speak. Shannon.
Thank you. I was just going to back some of the statements in there around the speeds, and it's that even seeing a 10-degree drop in speed outside my property, the difference between 70 and 60 is phenomenal. The noise level, the amount of dust kicked up, a lot of the safety concerns that I see from the crossing out in front of my property have dropped off dramatically. It's an enormous change, that difference between 70 and 60. Even just getting out of the side streets and crossing the road here, it makes a big deal for. So I definitely support the lower speeds. I wouldn't have understood how important it was until it actually changed right outside my gate, and it's phenomenal, the difference. The other thing I was going to say was that whilst I support Councillor Foster's concerns around other beaches and other areas, I'd like to see, if we were going to put something like a blanket speed limit on beaches in place, some sort of mechanism for recreational areas for motorbikes and things like that. Not everywhere, put them, make sure it's targeted where we want it, but we do lose a lot of recreational value if you do that. And as a dirt bike rider in the past, I have been up and down the far end of Midway Beach many times, but it's definitely not appropriate around houses or high value recreational areas. So whether it's something like the jet ski zone in terms of signage and an area where it's allowed, but just managing some recreational activity in that space. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Shannon. Okay, we move to Sandra, then Isaac, then Josh, then Terry. Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess for me, the most important thing is the ability to enforce what we put in place. And I come back to the school at Mirawai, which I drive through several times a day. I find it incredibly scary. If I was the parent of a child, especially a small child, going to that kura, I would be horrified at some of the driver behaviour. And I guess, Dave, coming back to your comment around the fact that it is Waka Kotahi that looks after that stretch of road, do we have any way of supporting maybe the police in terms of a speed camera? I understand the fact that we can't tell Waka Kotahi how they're going to manage the speed on that stretch of road, but can we support our community in a slightly different fashion? Yeah, I'm thinking along the lines of the city cameras. We have a really great relationship with them there. Is there any way that as a community we could work alongside the police and GDC to provide the stick, because the carrot's not working?
David Wilson.
So through you, Madam Chair, it's one of those things we are unable to influence as a council. What we have been doing, and we do have a close working relationship with the police when it comes to sites where we know where speed is an issue and accidents, we look at the road and we look at it from an engineering point of view is can we make the road safer for people to go around, or actually can we slow people down by the way that we do things on those stretches of road at the moment. And we've got a couple of sites we're working with the police with now across the district and how we can make them safer, because we know people are going to speed on them regardless of what the police do or regardless of what we're trying to do. People are dying on those roads. So we're looking at what interventions we can do between us. However, we're not able to put speed cameras in, or this council's talked to the police before at the Regional Transport Committee to ask them for speed cameras. Remember along Stout Street it was talked about, but we aren't able to put things in for them to enforce. We can only work with them.
Is there a potential, sorry, supplementary to that, so is there a potential for us to partner with our community, given that we're working on township plans, and Muriwai is one of those? Can we, I'm looking to circumvent or circumnavigate, if you like, the fact that we have, it seems, no jurisdiction over that particular piece of road. And you know, one child is going to be too many in that situation. So it may be for Nadine possibly more so to say whether or not we can partner with the community in order to give them a wee bit of push back.
Yes, through your worship. Yeah, I mean, certainly that's part of, if that's a priority for those townships, that's certainly part of what we would do through a township planning process. But yeah, I think that we would need to just work through that with the community as we're out there.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hughes.
And can I suggest it could be raised formally with NZTA at RTC, that it is a serious concern, because that then does at least sharpen their focus and it's been put in the public domain.
Fair comment. Thank you, Pat. Okay, Isaac, then Josh, then Terry.
Yeah, just one question first before I get to my main point. What is the difference between the two recommendations? So the first one, approving the draft speed management plan for consultation. And then, so I'm fine with that part. And then approving this proposed speed limit implementation plan.
Mr. Wilson.
Can I just get Tina to answer that one? I'm just answering something else on my phone at the moment, if that's all right, sorry.
Yeah, no, I'll carry on with my other point then. So I'm probably going to be slightly controversial and speak against this one. So things like Stout Street, so I think the proposal there is to reduce it to 40 kilometres per hour. Having spoken with the residents of Stout Street, I don't think the issue is they have is with people going 50. The issue they have is with people going 70, 80, 90. So I'm not quite sure from the feedback I've received whether that's going to solve any problems. And the same with things like Tukumari Bay along the beach road going 30 the whole time. I don't think that's been the issue. It's been the issue with people speeding. And so for me, it's more of a police issue and, you know, having those punishments in place rather than the actual speed limits themselves. So I'll probably, depending on the difference between 1 and 2, when David gets back to me, I'll probably speak against it.
Tina, do you want to comment in regards to the two recommendations that are on page 11? Just the first one talks about the draft speed management, and then the second one, the proposed speed limit and implementation plan. Can you just clarify for us? Thank you.
So the second one is kind of the detail. It's that table basically on page 14. Proposed program for years 1 to 3 implementation plan. So it's kind of the detail, and just the first one is that we're planning to consult in February, because I think originally we had hoped to do it before the end of this year, but yeah, because of the setting of speed limits rule change not being done until then, yeah, that's why we're proposing in February.
So just a question, follow-up question. So part 2 will also be going out for consultation.
Yeah, we're hoping to consult on if you guys are happy with our plan. Yeah.
So in any case, this isn't going to be the final decision for either point.
Nope.
Okay.
Okay, we move to Josh, the Josh Bill combo.
Uncle Bill, you want to speak?
Good morning, Your Worship, fellow councillors. I had a good look at it. I also attended a number of those meetings. This is an old fart talking. This is another case of Transport Agency imposing their view on our wider community. The question that was asked at the Real Storia fire station was, we propose so-and-so, 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 do you agree with it? And quite a few were taken aback, quite a few agreed, quite a number didn't. But I see it's here in the proposal to become legislation at time. So from my view, I mean, I'm all for progress, and speed does have its problems in terms of crashes. We have a question I asked, why did Waka Kotahi not seek a further mandate before they put this to us to ensure? Because if you have a good look at it, in some cases, as been mentioned earlier, especially by Kerry, there's a real mishmash of speeds that are being recommended. I don't really think that that's good enough in terms of where we are today. However, I would like to know, in terms of Waka Kotahi, why did they not seek wider approval from the community before they implemented or put this all in front of us?
Who's going to answer, Dave?
The bill, sorry, through you, Madam Chair, Councillor Bedet, this is for us to take out to communication with, consultation with the community.
I understand that, Dave, perfectly, but we've become the drones.
So through you, Your Worship, this is because of where we're sitting in the planning cycle. This is something that we wanted to do, and we're being caught kind of in the middle of some of their rule changes, but we're proceeding with it so that we can carry on, because we know that there's community interest in how we look at our speed across our network, and it's something that's a priority in our regional land transport plan.
With it, that fella, I'm not going to argue the point. I mean, in principle, I support that we've got to control speed because of what the outcomes are when there's too much speed. But there are places, if I can give you an example, I've travelled that coast road 20 odd years, and there are times from Whangarā into town or into Wainui, you're on your own. Currently it's at 80k. When there's a lot of traffic, that's fair enough, but most of the time there's not a lot of traffic. So anyway, I'll support it.
Thank you,
Uncle Bill.
Thank you. Mr. Sheldrake.
Yeah, thank you. I also totally agree with Larry's comments about the beaches. I'd like to see consistency across them. And just a general sort of view, regardless of any of the speeds coming down, it's all about the policing of it. With speeding, you know, if a limit comes down to 60, people will still go over it, or 50 or 40. So it's the ability to have a decent policing program and hit the offenders.
Yeah.
Red, I seem to have lost the ability to raise a yellow hand on my drop down bar. Can I speak to this paper at the moment?
I just see, I just want to make sure. Oh, so if you hover over the bottom of your the box that have all the, if you hover that, it should come up, then raise hand. Just at the bottom.
Yesterday it was showing up under the participants, and my drop down menu had mute, rename, raise my hand, but it's gone today, and I don't know why.
It should be at the bottom where the chat box and the participant. If you hover right at the bottom underneath the last person.
Yeah, I don't have a mouse because
Anyway,
I'm using an Apple.
You go.
Okay, so I just want to check. My concerns are in line with Isaac's, and the recommendation was, I've gone off it now, hang on a moment, 3 pages, let me go back to it. I'm assuming it's implicit that it's this number 2, the proposed speed limit implementation plan as part of the draft speed management plan. So I guess it just, because it said approve the draft speed, but then just approves the speed limitation implementation plan. But Tina, can you confirm that really the word draft is implicitly in number 2?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. Well, I'm happy to support the recommendation on that basis. This is both drafts.
Thank you. So at this stage, I don't see any other hands up, and I just texted Andy, even though his electricity and everything is out, he can still listen in via a guest, so he can text me if he have a question. Pat moved this paper, Kerry seconded it. If there are no other questions, the recommendations are on page 11. Approves that the draft speed management plan proceeds to consultation next year, 2020, February. And then number 2, approves the proposed speed limit implementation. Okay, all in favour, hands up. Against? Looks like everyone. Yes, thank you. This is carried. We are now going to move, I think we do the skate park and then we take a little coffee break. So let's go to page 56. This is an exciting project. I'm so glad it is moving ahead. Way back years ago, I was.
We have a paper on page 47 as well, Your Worship.
What?
The gambling venue policy.
Let's go back to page 47. Thank you, Shannon. Ooh, I did not turn the page on this one. Okay, we go to page 47, councillors. We will talk about our gambling venue policy approval. And I know Tony has emailed some questions, so this is just a review that we are doing. What staff member will be speaking to this? Heather, are you going to speak, or Joe?
Joe.
Joe, thank you, Joe.
Morena tato. I will just briefly mention Heather Milner is a new policy analyst in our team. So she is online. Very pleased to welcome her to the team. So I may defer to her for some questions on the detail. So this report is introducing the gambling venue policy again. It is again coming up for renewal. We are going a little bit early just due to timing around local government elections and such next year. Some of you may well remember this process before. So every 3 years we need to review our policy, which covers both the Gambling Act and the Racing Board Act. So this is all about how we manage pokie machines, as they're colloquially called, and the TAB. We don't actually have that many levers we can pull. So basically our levers are limited to whether we have a cap on how many pokie machines are in our district, where they can be located or relocate to. And then there's a little bit around mergers that we can control as well. Another point the paper raises is whether council wants to consider some form of ethics policy. That was discussed last time, but not progressed. So that's about how we ourselves apply for money from the proceeds of gambling for grants and the like. So that's just a brief intro. This is just seeking approval to start the review process. Obviously, there will be further workshops and reports to council with the detail and the options for you to properly debate and discuss.
Thank you for that. Did you see, Joe, that Tony asked a question last
I did,
time?
yes. I will
So
just bring up my email.
Good, I'm just gonna, Tony, you go with your question and then Joe can answer. Thank you.
I actually worked out the question. I did some research on the DIA website. So the GMP, which is the actual spend or the gambling loss, is what's left over after the return to player, the RTP. And by law in New Zealand, the RTP is set at 85%, which means of every $100 put through a pokie machine, $85 must be returned to the player. And generally it's over a 1,000 bet cycle. So every $1,000 that you bet, every $1,001 bets should return $850 to the player. So if you look at that amount of money, just say 2019, and we'll call it $10 million average, over the last 4 or 5 years, that means the churn on spend is between 66 and 110 million. Although it's a bit hard to calculate exactly. But you know, it's an extraordinary amount of money. And I think the GMP figure, although that's the actual loss out of a punter's pocket, doesn't truly reflect the amount of gaming or gambling going on pokie machines when you consider that $10 or $11 million is only 15%, and it could be even greater, because some machines are set at an RTP of 90%, and in fact some of the casinos run at 94%. So we don't know, I don't know what the machines are on average at Gisborne are, but let's say the trusts that run them are greedy and they want to take as much as they can, then they'll set them at 85, which is the legal minimum. So it's an incredible situation, and so I have a lot of experience with from my legal career with the gambling industry, in opposition to it actually. So I've got a lot of data, and this report, I'll just say all my things now. So what I would like to see in the consultation and preparation as we go through this for review is that we actually get some independent data on the impacts of gambling and problem gambling for Tairawhiti. I didn't see that to be specifically noted in the parties to be spoken to or consulted with. It does talk about user groups, but we don't have an official gambling support unit or a service provider in Tairawhiti, and gambling or pokies particularly disproportionately affect Māori and Pacifica communities, really significantly disproportionately impact upon them. And so there's a massive equity issue. So I want us to make sure that this review is a really, really comprehensive review. And I didn't feel from what was noted as to who we were going to consult with that really was going to be a deep enough dive for my liking. So I'll raise that now. And I'll just leave it at that and maybe come back to it, Madam Chair, if I'm prepared to what everyone else says.
Good. We have Isaac next. Thank you.
Did you move it, Tony?
No.
Okay, I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Was that Tony that just spoke? Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so I've got a mover in Councillor Hughes and a second in Councillor Robinson. Councillor Hughes, did you want to speak to this, or you would just, okay. Any more discussion? Like Joe said, this is just the beginning of the process, which we do every 3 years. So, Pat.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I totally support the comments that Councillor Robinson has just made, because the reviews in the past have come via the Hearings Committee, and there was a person representing the Problem Gambling Foundation in Gisborne, and that position isn't currently filled. And we've had strong representation from a number of key groups in town informally, and I noticed that the various individuals who've come before council in the past have different roles and different other NGOs now, but it is a real problem for our city, and I'm sure that with the right level of publicity that we will get feedback. And a lot of thought went into arriving at that the limit on the number of machines, not just a cap on actually limiting them. And I think some councillors will remember the last time we had a debate around it, we did allow them to move one licensee could move to a new premise, whereas prior to that, in the period prior to that, we had a limit so that if you actually closed that premise and wanted to move, you lost the number of machines. If Mayor Meng Foon pleaded for the fact that buildings would never be upgraded if there was the potential for them to lose the license if they shifted from one building to another. So that was the reason that moving machines was allowed in the last review, but it certainly is important, and it does take money from one section of the community particularly. And with respect to councils accepting funds, I think I'd be right in saying we mainly take them from lotteries, which I know is still gambling, but I'm not being aware that we've been applying to pub charities or the Southern Trust or whatever the other lower level agencies are in Gisborne, and maybe that can be reported to us in the next paper that we have.
Thank you for that, Pat. I do have a question here from Councillor Cranston, then we move to Meredith, and if no one else wants to speak, we'll finish up with Tony. So Andy is saying on gambling, is there a rationale, Joe, to the 18 machines, i.e. why the 18? Is there a date for the ethics policy, as there could be a connect?
So the rationale for the 18 machines, I think that was a reflection of how, looking at how many machines both the clubs, we have 2 clubs in Tairawhiti had, and it was a bit of a compromise between what a merger could look like and how many machines would be left. So there is no, if you like, empirical rationale. It's all a bit discretionary. And what was the second question, sorry?
The second one was, what is the timeline for the ethics policy?
So we haven't, that's not on our work program at the moment. We've raised that as being something that council may wish to consider, because it was discussed last time round, and in the end we didn't, the decision was not to move forward. So there is no timeline as yet, because there is no clear direction to proceed.
Thank you for that. Meredith.
Thank you. I just, I'm so grateful that we are reviewing this space because of the community harm that gambling does, particularly in our region, and as Councillor Robinson has noted. So I was just following up really regarding the ethics policy, because I noted in the report it talked about council taking a neutral standpoint. So Joe, I mean, because, you know, the ethics of this is council does take funding from a gambling space. So our role in this, how do we mitigate that? And the notion was being a neutral standpoint when we regulate and monitor this space as an entity that relies on funding to it. So I note there's some other councils that have discussed this too. So with the ethics policy, I'm really looking forward to that conversation, because I think that we are challenged more and more in transparency around ethics as councils. So I just wanted to say I'm really interested in the ethics policy discussion and more detail to come back to us. But do we note any other gambling that happens in region? To be clear, I hear of stuff that goes on in our community, but I wondered, because we're just focusing on poker machines and TAB space, but do we have a whole understanding of other gambling that happens within our region that is perhaps causing harm? Or as council, are we only to focus on this?
So through you, Madam Chair, these are the only tools we really have in terms of controlling gambling. I know that during the last review, it was talked about that potentially by stopping gambling through poker machines and the TAB, moving it online is kind of the obvious avenue that people with serious addictions and problems will follow, and we have no control over that online gambling space.
I guess also I just would like to see in our budget framework the impact if we were to ethically decide to not take funding from any form of gambling. I mean, with all due respect, my views. So I'd just be interested to see the impact of that to us as a council. But even if we were talking in that ethical space to taking a lower less kind of take from gambling spaces, knowing that the harm it causes. So as a council looking at being challenged about our ethics. But thank you for the report, and again I endorse the review because I think it's important. Kia ora.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, Tony, do you have a final question?
Yeah, so I found what I was, just my point was, I had a question was, when was the last time council received an independent report on gambling harm, particularly pokey harm for Tairawhiti?
So through you, Madam Chair, I don't believe one was received the last time we did the gambling review. I'd have to check back to see if we had an independent report that, the time before that.
Right. So, and that then fed into the looking at the timeframes on page 55 of the next steps. Because it looks quite a short, succinct piece of work, and where would that slot in there? So I would urge that the obtaining of an independent report on the harm of problem gambling in Tairawhiti, and particularly focus on Tairawhiti, is scheduled into that work plan, please. That will strongly influence, I think, or inform us as to
the position we take in this review. It should anyway.
Thank you.
So what we'll go away and look at that and see, make sure we can find the budget and how much that will push out the timeframes.
Thank you.
Okay, councillors, we are on page 47. Oh, Kerry, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say that in the event that for some reason we can't find the money, I don't think that should prohibit us as a council pulling together that ethics policy. I think as someone who's a beneficiary of those funds, it's necessary because there are clearly ethical issues around there. And so I wouldn't like to see our inability in a obviously resource constrained environment to raise those funds, meaning that we don't address that policy issue. I think that should be a high priority for us, and that will inform what then becomes of the policy itself. So yeah, that would just be my point.
Thank you. So we're on page 7. Thank you for that, Joe, as well. We have a mover in Councillor Hughes, a seconder in Councillor Robertson. Hand up. All in favour? All good. Thank you. Carried. So now we move to page 56, which is the skate park. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Michelle, for joining us. We take this as read. This has been a project for so long, and I'm sure all councillors are as excited as I am. So this is read. So what I'm going to do is just, Michelle, ask you if you want to give us maybe a quick 1 minute, and then we can open the floor to some questions. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a really exciting project, and the Tairawhiti Adventure Trust have done a huge amount of work, as I think you'll all understand in getting to this point. So a report was presented in March with concept plans and a desire to go out to seek funding for the skate park. And fortunately, that funding has been obtained, which is absolutely fantastic. So we're now in the position of needing to make that happen and enable that process to get underway. So this report essentially outlines the steps that are now required to make that happen. There are a series of steps that include public notification around a lease, a temporary road stopping and then more permanent road stopping process, and then also, just due to tight timeframes, the need to enable the Tairawhiti Adventure Trust to get on and do some demolition work through a service agreement. Yeah, so it's quite a condensed process, but yeah, I've also got Tyler here in case he has anything further to add as well. Tyler.
Fantastic. Tyler, is there anything you want to add before we open the floor for questions?
Look, I think that's really well covered. Probably the only thing I would add is the sort of proposed recommendations may look a little bit clunky on paper, but that's what we saw as best balancing timeliness of the project with our requirements under the Reserves Act for granting a lease.
Fantastic, thank you. I know there's been some timeframes because the money came about, and which is fantastic, and we want to grab it and make it go. So thank you for trying to find solutions that tick all the boxes. We are going to open the floor for questions. Tony, we start with you, then Larry. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got quite a few questions on this. I found the recommendation to transfer ownership, my first note here is why. And as I read through the report, I still couldn't find an answer as to why we had to transfer ownership of the park facilities to TAT, and particularly if that transfer was to take place prior to a lease being entered into. I understand the rationale of community ownership, but likewise, there'd be nothing stopping TAT if they own the assets and the lease is a standard commercial lease or standard lease, which allows for assignment or transferring of the lease rights for TAT to actually sell the assets in due course. So I don't think the public are greatly protected by what's proposed here. And I don't understand, I can understand there being some restraints around or need for haste with funding, but I don't know if what this proposes is the best pathway providing protection for both the assets and for council in acting on behalf of the community. I just really struggle to understand as to why that particular recommendation is in there. And it seems to be addressed in part with the service agreement that they can demolish it, but ownership could still be retained by the council until the legal framework is in place to transfer not only proper ownership, but also responsibilities. Because we could have a situation, it is highlighted in the report, where TAT falls over for some reason or don't follow through, and we're left with a half-destroyed facility, which we wouldn't own, according to what's proposed in this report. So I don't support the report recommendations as they stand right now.
So do you want an answer to that? Michelle, would you be able to
Yes, please.
just comment in regards to that question where we talk about the transfer of ownership and the rationale behind it?
I might actually, Tyler, are you able to speak to that one? I know you've spent a lot of time working on this one.
Thank you.
And I'll step in.
Yeah, look, no problem. The asset does have a carrying value of 230,000. That's a paper value. At the end of the day, it's an end of life asset, and we're describing all of basically the concrete that is the skate park at present. The reason for needing to transfer that upon granting of a lease to the Adventure Trust is that they can then demolish that asset in phases as they rebuild it. They will receive no residual value from that. In fact, they'll pay to demolish the asset. It has a carrying value because of some of the maintenance work that we've done on it over the years. The importance of the Adventure Trust owning the future asset, I suppose, is two-part. They are able to fundraise in ways that council can't. They could seek more sponsorship. They can go to different funders that we can't. But also, that is a requirement of their funding that they've sought for the new skate park, is that they will be the eventual owners of the new asset. So it's unavoidable that they'll be the eventual owners. The reason for assigning them the ownership, once a lease is granted, is so that they can progressively demolish it, and it's not on council's books.
So really, in response to that I understand what you're saying, but that still doesn't actually justify transfer of the ownership. A sensible move, in my view, would be to retain ownership. They demolish it while we retain ownership. Therefore, we retain legal control, because this transference is asked to be done before a lease and other formal, because of the public notification periods, et cetera, are in place. So there's all those things can take place, but us still retaining ownership, therefore retaining control if in the event something goes wrong with it. If we transfer ownership to them prior to the lease being put in place because the public notification periods, blah, 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 then we create a hiatus period where in actual fact things could go wrong, and what do we then serve notice on them because they own the asset to remedy a half demolished thing. We can still retain ownership through that process until the lease is secured, and then we can transfer ownership over. Your rationale, your answer you gave us does not satisfy the rationale as far as I'm concerned.
Your Worship, if I may just jump in here on that particular issue. So that certainly was one of the considerations that we had in terms of the recommendations that were here. Part of the remedy to address what you were saying, Councillor Robinson, and to enable the community group to be able to access their funding was to put in place an interim agreement that protects the council from any risks there. I don't have that the wording yet, but Tyler or Michelle might be able to comment on that.
So the service agreement that's described would protect council by ensuring that by initiating that demolition, that TAT will see through that process to completing the first phase of the skate park. So we can guarantee that, for skate park users, they're not left with a worse experience because of it, that phase is completed.
Okay. We move on to Councillor Foster. Larry, the floor is
Okay,
yours.
thank you. I'm happy to move the paper as it is and congratulate the Tairawhiti Adventure Trust for the hard work that they've done. I know a lot of the members on there, they've been involved with the skate park originally as well, and I just really admire the commitment and the work that they have put into this project. And also, you know, the history of the venue was originally a skating rink, and then from there was actually the only Gisborne Board Riders club rooms in the 80s. And there was many memorable occasions there, and national events held and based at that event, that venue as well, after surfing competitions around the region. So, you know, it's got a great history, and obviously now skateboarding and surfing are part of Olympic sports. So, you know, for the future of that venue and the whole plans of the new upgrade are just phenomenal, and it'll be such a benefit for this region. So I'm really proud to be able to move this paper.
Thank you, Larry. Okay, we move on to Kiri.
Sorry, it always takes me even to find the mute button. I'm happy to second it. I think, again, I think it's huge congratulations to those that have been behind driving this. I think that's a fantastic community facility that is going to be provided, which will have an outsized impact on our youth. And I think it's a fantastic good news story. I don't have any issue with stopping the road. I don't think anyone knew there was a road. And I still can't actually identify where the road is. So given that we're looking at I presume the titles there, obviously no one else is going to miss the road either. I hear Tony's concerns, but I think if we were to run into issues as the owner, it wouldn't be any different to them running into issues. We all still want to resolve the issues. And I think I'd be very surprised if somebody came up and said, hey, you know, these guys having an issue is worse than you having an issue. So I'm like, on that basis, I'm happy to second the paper. My question is, I do have a question around confident we are that in handing over the asset and requiring them to maintain it, that in the long term, that the maintenance, you know, the funds are going to be available to maintain it to a standard that, I mean, obviously in the past, we've struggled to maintain this asset in, you know, a reasonable condition. What protections are in place in the event that philanthropic funds are not sufficient? We wouldn't like, I don't think, as a community to see this massive investment underfunded going forward. Have we considered whether or not protections are needed to ensure that this facility is maintained in the long run, in the event that what is a great community organisation now, in the event that it is not as strong in the future in its ability to raise funds, is possibly compromised?
Through you, Madam Chair. So that's a really good question, particularly that maintenance and operations. So making sure that there's longevity and there's a well thought through plan between TAT and council. So my view is that we are going to be embarking on an asset management plan and a service agreement for the longer term, so that we can be really clear on respective roles of the various agencies, and also that we've got some certainty of how that maintenance is going to be funded as well. So we do anticipate, so historically council has funded part of this asset in terms of maintenance and operations, so that will continue. However, working through the details of that is yet to come. The other aspect to that is around the Reserves Act lease period. So you'll see that there's 3 rights of renewal essentially. So that 11 years plus 11 plus 11 gives another dimension in order for council to be able to have that conversation.
Thank you, Michelle. Sandra and Pat, you are next.
Go ahead, Pat.
Is it me? Yeah. Thank you. I had one or two questions around it, and Madam Chair, you're quite familiar with how the War Memorial Theatre Trust functions, and while it's not the same thing, there are elements of similarity. So I was just a bit concerned that we don't know the names of the trustees, and I'm sure that that's a vital and really great organisation, and I support all the positive things that have been said about finally upgrading that, because it is a really well-used facility, but it would have been useful, and there was always transparency about who the trustees were in respect to the War Memorial Theatre Trust and any changes. So I would also like to see an additional recommendation along the lines of provides an annual report from the Tairawhiti Adventure Trust covering their financial situation and their future project development within the skate park, so that when they embark on something with a level of accountability to the ratepayers at large, and also an opportunity for them to say, right, this is what we plan to do in the next year. And I don't think that's an unreasonable request.
Do you care to comment, Michelle or Tyler? Because it's true what Councillor Seymour said, both her and myself served and still serve on the War Memorial Trust that fundraised $5 million way back for our War Memorial and our Lawson Field Theatre, and we do annual reports just to update. So I'm just wondering if that is part of reporting that you might have had in mind.
I'm not.
Go for it.
So I'm not certain of previous conversations around this with the trust, and Tyler might be able to assist. But I agree, it sounds reasonable and sensible that an annual report come forward with how the trust is progressing, particularly.
Can that be incorporated in your negotiations or lease agreements or whatever you are signing with them, or does it need to be a recommendation we add to our recommendations today, or would that just be business as usual that you would add?
Supplementary, Madam Chair, I'd like to see it be an addition, and councillors can decide whether they support it or not, but it be an additional recommendation, because it is going to, and we want them to get public money, and they're going to need to provide this kind of report to funders anyway. So it's not actually going to be asking the TAT Trust to do something they're not doing already, but it is on a piece of public land with a public interest, and we should be asking for the report to be made available on an annual basis. I don't believe that's unreasonable at all.
Thank you.
And I think it needs to be in the recommendation so that it is does happen.
Thank you. We'll talk to that once we come to the recommendations. Shannon.
I thought Meredith was before me, but unless you just haven't put her hand down yet.
Spoken, and Tony has already spoken.
So yeah, I was just going to comment on that final piece, and it was that I don't think putting any more burden on the trust is required. They already have reporting responsibilities as a trust, and we would be able to receive that if we requested it. But I don't think they need to write a specific report to council and have our staff have time allocated to it to incorporate reports, and it's just an unnecessary burden for a group that's already performing well currently, and aren't actually an organisation of council. They're not a mechanism of council, and they own a very, very long life asset. It's a big concrete foundation. I don't expect there to be terrible maintenance issues and work. So yeah, I'm comfortable with them just getting on and doing what they do, rather than us having to play a part in it.
Thank you for that. Meredith, I thought you have spoken, but you have not. Meredith, the floor is yours.
No, sorry, Madam Chair. Listen, for me, this is a fabulous example of community. This project has come about because our community has recognised this asset as being something fabulous for region, and we've got these amazing people who got involved with the project and have led this change. And whilst I appreciate other colleagues' concerns, this is partnership. This is our kind of partnership space as a new framework of councils across, that we are looking at. We are doing JMAs. We are constantly trying to ensure we hear from our community and support it. Council's an enabler. So I wouldn't like to see us with all due respect to requiring additional, reporting frameworks, because this community group are actioning people. They want to get to the business of meeting the needs of the young people and all people who use this resource. So I want to congratulate the team, to getting it to this point. It's been a project that's been discussed and shared about in region, and those who use the park for a lot of purposes. Parents go down there to chill out in the sun while their kids use the space. It's got a beautiful site where it sits. Rongo Fukata have been doing some amazing mahi in that space, in that precinct. So my question to this is, why would we just wholeheartedly want to support communities taking ownership when they do, and they're given freedom to do things? We just set in place parameters of partnership, relationship, and they, as everyone has said, have already got a reporting mechanism for funding and all those frameworks. They're locals, they love living, working and playing here, and I'm so excited for this space. Obviously, I've already noted my conflict. My other conflict in this space is a group of people go down and plant riparian along the river there, and so their access, I just wouldn't like to see. To be fair, I understand the group have already spoken to the multiple stakeholders, but it's really important that that access way through Bright Street. So Kerry, there's a gate that stops people driving through into the park, but it can be opened up and vehicles accessing the park for various events. But that would be my only concern, is to ensure the stakeholders who have been involved with the park for decades still have access to planting and weeding, as they have been for the last nearly 10 years. My husband leads that project. He's one of the key leaders, so conflict there, of course, but I help out when I can. So just ensuring the relationship between stakeholders is good and positive is my challenge to those in council staff, ensuring our partnership relationship is on point. They don't need to do any extra council, in my view, because they're making this happen. So I think we should just absolutely support it. All councillors should get down there on a scooter, a skateboard, or some mechanism with roller skating, and show the people of this region we wholeheartedly support community development like this, and we can all skate. Let's do this. Kia ora.
Thank you for that, Meredith. Tony.
A couple of questions for the staff in charge of this. I tautoko what Pat says. It seems inevitable that the trust will require a maintenance or service agreement with GDC, because there will be an ongoing funding demand for them, and an annual report feeding back on the matters that Pat talked about is not particularly onerous. The other thing is, for staff members, given we are transferring ownership of an asset, granted it's going to be demolished, will there be a provision in the legal documents, be it, well, it could be part of the sale and purchase agreement, but it more likely sit in a lease, that ownership will be offered back to GDC, or will vest back in GDC if TAT ends, in other words, they wind the trust up, or it seeks to divest itself of ownership of the asset. Because as I said before, there's nothing stopping TAT selling the skate park asset if they own it, because generally the lease will provide assignment or subletting. So will that be covered off in the lease so that we have the first right of refusal per se?
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't see why we couldn't achieve that. It certainly would be one of the risks we'd be looking to mitigate through the sale and purchase and the lease process. We'll have 3 to 4 legal mechanisms by which we can mitigate some of these risks, and certainly we've got a month now to go through those with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that we're protecting this asset, protecting the Adventure Trust, and protecting our future skatepark users.
Tyler, at paragraph 36, it says on the report, one risk exists, that is if council allowed demolition of the skate park and a lease couldn't be granted to TAT. What grounds would you see that a lease couldn't be granted to TAT?
I mean, we are we're relatively hopeful and supportive that a lease would be granted. Council have already approved the plans, and for TAT to go ahead and seek funding. So there's been a significant level of endorsement already given. It's our requirement under the Reserves Act to notify the lease and genuinely consider any feedback that might come from the community. So I can't really speak to anything that concerns me as to what might come in, but again, that's the purpose of public notification, is that everyone gets a say.
And its worst case scenario is someone could take a court action to review our decision in this process, couldn't they? I mean, technically it could be tied up in court for a period. A lease may be challenged. A proposed lease may be challenged.
If we did not follow correct process in granting that lease, if we were to say gift the asset prior to granting a lease, or act in a way that makes this a foregone conclusion that we're granting TAT a lease, then that could potentially be challenged, and that's the reason for the process that's set out, is that it does balance that public notification and opportunity for anyone to have genuine input.
Thank you for that. I would like to just speak a little bit to this, and I do want to acknowledge both Michelle and Tyler. I have been behind the scenes, been involved a little bit with the trust, not involved, but them raising their concerns and getting nervous about timeframes and funding. And I just want to give a big shout out to Michelle and both Tyler for constructively working with the trust. It has not been easy. There's so many hoops to jump through. And Tyler, I agree with you. We want to do everything in a way that there's no challenge to how we do it, because this is a fantastic community asset. We should be applauding the trust for the work they have been doing to secure the funding. Michelle and myself are also working with another community group who are doing something totally different. And like I said in that meeting, Michelle, it's fantastic when a community group comes out, do work on our behalf and secure funding for that. We should really be going out of our way within our boundaries and rules to try and support them and make it work well for them. So I do want to give a big shout out to our staff, but also to the Tairawhiti Adventure Trust team. They have been working behind the scene for years. I want to give also a shout out to Trust Tairawhiti for giving them that funding. It is a facility that our community, our youth love. And I know that once we have this asset, it is going to be one of the places where our kids, maybe even ourselves, just Meredith on her scooter, would hang out. But thank you for that. So we are moving to page 57 at this stage.
I roller skate.
No, good. So what I wanted to ask, there was some chat earlier, Pat mentioned the addition of reporting requirements. So Tyler and Michelle, like I said earlier, can that be incorporated without a formal recommendation? Would that be standard process when we set a lease with them, or is that something, if councillors wish to add that, and we'll find out soon if they do, that it needs to be added as a recommendation today?
Through you, Madam Chair, I wouldn't see that as standard process in a lease. That said, there's probably grounds for another service agreement here with future consideration of maintenance, and that would be very easily built into that, and that would be reasonable to expect.
So Pat, are you happy that if there is a future agreement on maintenance, and as they progress in this, because obviously we are not just handing out stuff over to the Tairawhiti Trust, Adventure Trust, and say sayonara, see you later, happy building. This is a process we walk with them. So Pat, where are you? Are you happy to?
Well, I'm happy to put up that comment, and I'll read it again, and maybe Tony will second it. If it doesn't get a seconder, well, it fails, and it could be voted for separately. I mean, I think it's a fantastic project too, and it's great that it's actually happening. I've got no problem with the project. I'm just thinking of the long-term confidence that we can just keep in touch with them. I mean, it's not going to be asking to do something different, because they will be needing to do a financial report and an application, as you well know from the charitable things that you're involved with. And you have to put those material together to make an application. So to provide the report to council would be just one report that they're already doing, and it would keep us all in the loop. And we would know which part of the skate park they're planning to redevelop in the following year, for example. So the wording I suggested was provides an annual report from the, well, it probably doesn't need to say TAT. It just simply would be number 3, provides an annual report to council covering their financial situation and the future project development within the skateboard park, within the skate park. And I'm happy to move.
So we've got.
I'd second it, and it should lie legally, Madam Mayor, it should lie in the lease. It should be part of their obligation and their lease that they provide that. That's where the legal teeth will be. It wouldn't be in a service agreement.
I agree.
But I'd second it. That simply the recommendation says that is captured in a legal document binding TAT somewhere. So they can be open to staff to where it sits, but in my view, it would be in a lease.
Okay, so what I have at this stage is two recommendations moved by Councillor Foster, which is and seconded by Councillor Worsnop, which are the recommendations on page 57. Then I have a third recommendation moved by Councillor Seymour and seconded by Councillor Mr. Robinson to the wording that was just said. I did either and meeting support. Did you get the wording? Just give me a thumbs up or a hand up.
Provides an annual report to Gisborne District Council covering their financial situation and the future project development within the skate park.
Okay, so are we going to
note to be captured in the legal document? It could be in brackets.
Okay, so Larry, I give you, no, yep. Okay, Larry, did you have a question or a query? You will need to unmute yourself.
Part of the requirement of the funding from Trust Tairawhiti would be to have an annual reporting on the financial of it anyway. So that would be part of the process. So I've got no problem really with what I've recommended here. What is here, and so you know, it'd be easy for them to give us a copy of the report that they give to Trust Tairawhiti. They're a trust; they don't be bogged down doing reports all the time. So
exactly. That's my point. They can make it available to council on a formal basis, and it will be the same report that they'll be doing for Trust Tairawhiti. I quite agree, Larry.
Yeah.
That's why it's no big deal.
Yeah. So in that light, I would support that. Being the mover of the recommendations. So yeah.
Well, you've moved number 1 and 2. Number 3 has been moved by Pat and Tony. So if you want to support that, right, yep. I'll put those separately. Mr. Dowsing.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say, like, stressing that it's got their financials in it, and putting an outline around that is not really our business. You know, they may go on to do many other projects and have funders and items that have no relationship to council. They just have a lease, and we're stressing this over the fact that we're giving them, some old concrete that needed demolition anyway. I don't understand. We don't ask this of any of our other lessees. So yeah, I don't support this, and I'm glad you're going to take it separately.
I will. Nadine and then Meredith.
Yes, through your worship, I was just going to reiterate what Councillor Dowsing had pointed out in terms of the fact that we don't ask this from any of our other community organisations that lease our land. So we would be reaching in further than what is normal practice. I do accept that there are some risks in terms of acquiring funding to complete the project, in which the council should have some further information from the trust on, but ongoing information around their financials and the lease agreement arrangement is not something we have done before, nor would I recommend that we do that.
Thank you. Meredith.
Oh yeah, well, I just wanted to seek clarity because we're all in agreement. This is a fabulous project in every way. So, is there something amiss that you know, in his legal world, Mr. Councillor Robinson is raising? So, I guess CE Tyler or Michelle, do we have concern that we haven't put in place any of the mitigation to the risks raised by Councillor Seymour and Robinson? Because I felt that in this space, as Councillor Dowsing has noted, it's a lease agreement. We have just heard from our CE that we don't do this with anything else. So are we missing something that we perhaps need to have in there? So I just need some clarity, because I wholeheartedly support this as it is, and so don't see the point. But if I don't ask that, then I'll think, oh, I should have asked. Kia ora.
Okay, so what I have at this
Why
stage
I raised
is
it is because the Mayor and I sit on the War Memorial Theatre Trust, and that trust deed only has a role in raising money for the two theatres, and the recipients can only be council. And in that trust deed, we are required to report to council on an annual basis, which will come after our annual general meeting, which will be in September. And all I was doing is looking at this trust being set up, and some people clearly know who's involved and others don't. That's fine. And I was just making that comparison. It wasn't a lease agreement, it's simply a fundraising arm, and the requirement to report to council is placed upon that fundraising arm. And it's only there for the two theatres, so it doesn't seem to be hugely different to me. But I get the point that we don't require lease agreements on other a requirement within lease agreements for other leased land. But is there a great build going on some of them? Not necessarily. And I think it could be disposed of in 5 years' time if everyone's happy with how it's gone. But it'll be decided on the vote.
okay. Let's go to our vote. We're on page 57. So I'll put Larry's and Kerry's recommendation first, which was, I'm not going to read it all out. Let me see. Number 1, A, B, C, D, and number 2 has been moved by Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Worsnop. Hands up. I see hands all around. Thank you. People want to vote against those recommendations? No. Okay, then we moved, so that was carried, Heather. Then we moved to number 3, which Pat moved and Tony seconded, which, Pat, can you just read out the words, please?
Provides an annual report to Gisborne District Council covering financial situation and future project development within the skate park.
Okay, so hands up who support number 3.
And I'm supporting it.
Okay, 3. Okay.
Uncle Bill supports it.
Okay, hands up against. Okay, so it's not carried. Number 3 is not carried. Thank you, everyone. We are going to take a little coffee break. We'll be back at 10:45. I'll mute all so I don't hear you drinking your coffee. We'll see you at 10:45. Thank you.
I'll give you a call back, Pat.
Okay, let's go. I just see that they're fixing the electricity, Whangarā, Wainui, Wheatstone. Those areas are quite a few still out. So Andy might be able to hop back on soon. Okay. Okay, next we're going to move to our regional. It's page 77, and we are going to talk about our regional wetland mapping. And thank you for Abby that's with us here today. Abby, are you going to give us a quick, the report is read, but will you be giving us a quick 1 minute on what you want to highlight in the report? Thank you.
Kia ora, Madam Chair, thanks. Actually, Yannick, who I co-authored the paper with, was going to provide the update. I don't know if he's
not on. Yeah, but I'm happy. I can take it as read. I'm very happy. It's just a noting report. So if you've got nothing to add, that's fine. But if there may be something you want to add, that's good as well.
I don't have anything to add at this stage. I'm happy for it to just be seen as read. Thanks, but happy to take questions, of course. Thanks.
Thank you for that. So councillors, we are on page 77, and this is just us mapping our wetlands across the region, ongoing work. Are there any questions here? Kerry, thank you.
Yeah, so not so much a question as probably to augment the report. I declared earlier that I'm involved with the Motu catchment planning phase. There's an advisory group compiled for that of locals, etc. And I just, while it's really quite good to be able to link in the wetland phase with the catchment planning process, what it certainly indicates is that when this is extrapolated over the entire region, the implications are enormous. The scope of wetlands in the Motu, while it's yet to be ground truthed, there's still a large number, considering that these are our most free draining soils in the whole region. So this is the place where you will have the least wetlands, probably by some large margin. All of our other soils are significantly heavier and far less free draining. And also the definition is the government has it of which has three parts to it. So it's the hydrology, it's the soils, and it's the surface plants, basically, the wetland species. Means that particularly for the coast and some of the areas west where there are clay soils, you've got enormous areas that are rushes that are fit within the definition of this if they're covered with water. I think it's within the growing season for more than 7 days is what the essential freshwater guidance is. So I think while this is just a noting report, I think it has to be noted that, it's imperative that we make sure that we understand the scope of this is potentially huge. Gathering this information, while we need to do it, we also need to communicate with that information what we plan to do about it, because we have to have this all mapped within, I think, 10 years from when the requirements became active. I think Yannick will know if that's what dates that give us to work to. But under the stock exclusion rules, anything that we identify as a wetland, farmers are compelled to exclude stock from that area, to exclude cattle. The implications of that will be in the millions of dollars probably very high millions. While this is a noting report on after this, we also need an idea when we have the extent of those wetlands understood of what implementing the stock exclusion rules actually means for our ratepayers, because that's the other part of this picture. While our rules are only part of it, and our rules obviously have to marry up with the national policy directives and national environmental standards, it actually means something very material for the people that this impacts. And like I say, if anything, it's probably going to have at least as much impact as the significant natural areas, if not more. And when taken together, it's a huge, huge cost that many of our landowners simply will not be able to meet if our timeframes are too short, which I'm not sure. Yannick, do you know how much time we actually have to have beyond the stock exclusion, beyond the mapping, when the stock exclusion has to take place by? Sorry, I do actually have a question. You can answer that for me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Madam Chair, my apologies for my late entry. I thought there was another item on the agenda.
All good.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, we've got until, there's several timeframes. One is 2023 for landowners to exclude stock according to the wetlands which have been identified through regional plans. Otherwise, it's 2025, but that's all contingent on how well our regional wetlands are mapped. And so that's really the dependency, is what our mapping program will look like over time. And as you correctly identified, we've got 10 years under the policy statement to do that. So there needs to be a little bit of alignment. And what I'm particularly mindful of is our time frame for notifying our regional plan provisions and our catchment plans by the end of 2023. So we don't have a lot of time. 2024, sorry.
Thank you for that. Shannon, you are next, then Larry. Thank you, Yannick.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to speak in support of the paper, even though it's a noting report, just to say that this was something that came out of was clear in the spatial plan, that when we had an assessment of wetlands in the spatial plan, there was just comment around the decline of wetlands over decades, but no actual strategy around repair or reclamation of wetlands or anything to do with planning in that space. So very glad to see this paper come up. Understand the concerns that Councillor Worsnop is raising as to what is achieved with this information, but his first step is that stock take. So yeah, really happy to see it.
Thank you. Mr. Foster, then Councillor Wharehenga.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to move the report, and but I just after hearing what Councillor Worsnop said about the Upper Motu being probably one of the lesser areas, and seeing that there were 784 potential wetlands, and out of those 313 were actually meeting the national policy statement for freshwater management. So needing protection or sort of some sort, and knowing what our region is like. I mean, my question is, have we got the manpower and the expense? It's going to be a great thing to have, information to have, but I'm just seeing how much this region is, and the requirement is this is going to take in man hours and dollars to achieve. So have we got the staff numbers to be able to achieve this in the required time, and the amount of money that's going to cost to get it done? Have we got good budgets for
it? So, through your worship, so I mean, I think this is part of the overall suite of RMA policies that we're having to respond to. So the budget was provided for in terms of the TRMP review. It might not be enough. I think the issue is around having the people to be able to deliver all the work, and we all know that everyone's struggling with that, right? So we just need to work with other councils and look at ways of trying to make our place attractive to attract staff to support us in the delivery or the implementation of that.
If I could add to the Chief Executive's words, Your Worship, I'd just like to talk of what Councillor Foster and Councillor Worsnop have been saying about the implications, because this is a significant piece of work. This is a major program of work for us. It's not only got implications for landowners, it's actually got implications for us in terms of monitoring as well. So it's not just the ground truthing and the ecologists and professionals and the technical expertise that you need to go out and validify the data, but you also actually need to monitor the wetlands over time. That's another NPS requirement. So actually what we need to do is develop a game plan that addresses all of these resourcing requirements and say, okay, well, how much resourcing do we have to do the work and how much do we need to secure into the future? So that's a question for us to look at.
Thank you for that, Yannick. Councillor Wharehinga.
Thank you, Your Worship. Josh, I take you to page 83, item 33. Wetland identification may also raise concerns within the community similar to those around the identification of significant natural areas. Many landowners already feel the burden of recent legislation requirements and see further limitations and costs on their business from the identification of natural and wetland areas. Staff got there a little bit after that. This is scary stuff, Madam Chair, and another implication by a government that doesn't understand the farming community. I understand the council's position in terms of having to meet timelines, but in terms of the farming community, this probably alongside other legislation or pending legislation, I'm awaiting with interest to hear the Three Water stuff because I'm a bit ignorant about that. I really think that this is a good report. Thank the staff for it. But if we don't get serious about this, you know, Kerry's right. If you extrapolate that out and go back a couple of pages, 93,000 hectares just in the Motu catchment alone. Well, we talk about the whole of our region. Where's that going to end up? So my question probably to Janik is understand the position in terms of staffing, understand the position in terms of resourcing. Where do we go from here, Janik? Because this significant natural area is an add-on to the wetland identification, and that's huge.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I understand the question correctly, Council was breaking up a little bit, but the question was where to from here? That's a really good question, Councillor. I think where to looks like a very, very solid engagement plan, because I don't think we can afford to do this identification process and then get to the end of it and say, surprise, and by the way, we've got SNAs in front of us. So I think we have to be very careful and very methodical in terms of how we go about going through the region, identifying wetlands and making sure that we're engaging suitably. And perhaps the catchment planning process is the appropriate vehicle for engaging with our landowners, with tangata whenua, and having the kōrero and working with landowners rather than simply imposing expectations on them. I think that's the only way. There's probably a little bit of work to do in terms of proportionality as well. And the NPS provides a little bit of guidance around that. So not all wetlands are going to be the same. So I think we'll need to think about the low-hanging fruit, which wetlands perhaps could be added to our current schedule of regionally significant wetlands, and what others there might be. I think there's probably a question around the wetlands that may be in the grey space. What we intend to do with those, is there a collective interest in restoring wetlands that may have been degraded? What does their protection look like? So there's a lot of questions and a lot of corridor that we need to undertake, and our treaty partners and our communities need to be in that space alongside us to make those decisions together.
Thank you, Janet.
Okay, Kiri and then Meredith.
Meredith can go first if you like. I've already spoken once.
Thank you, Councillor Worsnell. I just really wanted to, I guess, reiterate that we are, as a council, with all the changing legislation reforms before us, etc. Thank you, Yannick and team, for this paper, because we are constantly now being questioned around how much knowledge and respect to the natural spaces and areas in our region. So I'm just wanting to know, Yannick, resource-wise, but also just how detailed, how much knowledge in this space have we got based on years and years of collecting data, as councils do. But is this a relatively new, how much of it is new work, that is necessary? Are we reliant on old data that's helpful, or are we moving into a space of new data based on what government's asking? So this new legislation and new change, because I'm aware that during lockdowns, our government tends to go into a space of writing up new law. And so we've got a lot on our plate as council to contend with, and making best decisions is what we will want to do. So we're looking at the necessities right now for new information about our regions, SNAs, with all due respect to tangata whenaua's role in that as well. So, is this an undertaking considerable amounts? Thank you, it's a noting paper, but I note that it's big stuff, and it's how well resourced are we, and is it new work? Kia ora.
Yannick.
Through you, Madam Chair. I guess in terms of the resourcing, look, we're probably well placed in terms of our TRMP budget to look at the research. The implementation is probably another question that we need to think about a little bit more carefully. In terms of our existing data, I guess perhaps Abby would be better placed to speak to that. But our TRMP identifies 22 wetlands. We have FENS data, and we have land use classification data as well, but it doesn't go anywhere near the number that we've identified for the Motu catchment alone. The work that we engaged, we got a summer student to do, identified as many as 2,000 wetland parcels across the Rohe. So we're talking about a substantially larger number of possible wetlands than what we've actually identified through our current plans and tools. So that's new work, and there's no getting around that. So, I'm guessing the government saw that coming as well, and that there was a gap in the data right across regional councils, and probably drove a lot of the rationale for the policy statement to pick up on wetland policy. So there's quite a bit of work to do. With regards to SNAs, I think we'll probably need to take a look at what we've got first, and then start to develop a plan before we can be confident where the gaps are. But first port of call would be to look at our protection management areas. That's a really good resource. That's a good starting point.
Thank you for that. I'm going to move to Sandra, then Kiri, and then Pat.
Thank you. Yannick, I think that, I've got a couple of questions. One's a very practical one around just looking through the report where wetlands are delineated based on aerial imagery, and then it says a range of other inputs. I'm wondering if this speaks to some of the questions around involvement of landowners in tangata whenua. So does a range of other inputs include the people who know that piece of land best, or?
Through you, Madam Chair, when we go about the ground truthing, absolutely. I don't think we could go anywhere without landowner input and ground truthing through landowner consent. So yes, but just in terms of the desktop analysis, that was entirely GIS driven, aerial, LiDAR, land class database and that kind of information. So landowners did not have a contribution at the desktop stage.
Sure, okay. Because that probably leads into my next question, which is, for example, Tairawhiti and the work that they're currently doing in this space with our dear colleague, Dr. Dunn. Do we have the capacity to bring the range of other inputs to the table so that it becomes, so we can front load it effectively with what's real, rather than front loading it with what FENS or somebody else may think from a very much a desktop point of view, as you say?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think it'll depend on the game plan, but with the resourcing that we have, I think if we can engage and use the resourcing to engage our landowners and our treaty partners, then I think we're going to make good progress. But look, we probably won't have that detail until we land on a proper implementation plan, a pathway, and that's something that we can bring to you as well and communicate and get your input and feedback into as well.
Thanks, Janet.
Okay, Kiri.
Yes, so I just wanted to ask, because obviously we have 22 wetlands identified at the moment. We're going to run this software, do the ground truthing, and end up with probably thousands. Because the parcel size also is now so much smaller, right? The government's new rules capture so many because it goes down to a very small area now. My question is, given that the stock exclusion regulations kick in 2023, when are they considered identified? Is it when we've identified them in a map and said, hey, look, there are 2,500 wetlands and you've got, 50 of them? Or is it when we register them as a wetland in some way? And kind of added to that, under our current freshwater plan, we have a bunch of requirements around wetlands already. And when are they triggered? Because you need a wetland management plan to do virtually anything. The implications are more than just putting a fence around them. There's also implications for the requirement around restoration or the promotion of restoration, etc., that is stated in the Act. So where's the line? When does this affect me or my neighbour or whoever who has a parcel that is identified by you? And is that going to be part of the guidance and what did you call it earlier? The implementation plan?
Through you, Chair. It's probably several questions there to unpack. But probably what it points to in the first instance is probably we need to get a little bit of comms out there for our landowners and our farmers, so they actually understand the implications of the legislation, because there's a range of dimensions here. It's not just the policy statement, it's also the NES, it's also the regulations for stock exclusion, and they all overlap. And don't forget our TRMP as well. So it creates a tremendously complex space to understand and to navigate. It's actually hard for policy advisors to navigate, not less our landowners who the rules and the provisions affect. So there's probably a little bit of work for us to do in terms of their comms. But your first question was really about mapping and when the mapping kicks in. That's a question that I'm trying to struggle with as well. Is my understanding, and I may be wrong here, but my understanding is actually they kick in once we schedule them in the plan, because ultimately it's data until it's formalized through a plan change process. And until such time, we don't have a regulatory position to enforce data that we've collected. So until that stage, I feel we can treat it as data. But I'll probably need to come back to you on that one, Councillor Worsnop, and confirm. With regards to the stock exclusion requirements for new farms, the provisions kick in once the regulations were put in place in 2020. For existing farms, my understanding is 2023 for wetlands identified through a regional plan, and then 2025 thereafter. So again, probably important to provide that that information in a clear way so our farmers, our landowners can understand it. Don't forget the national environmental standards also have their own quirky requirements as well. So we need to get across that as well.
Yeah, I think just for those of you who probably are not in this space as much, the implications for some of the definitions, you've got to look at Aupuni and say, you know, that was all a wetland once. So the implications potentially, depending on how the definitions are applied, are pretty wide-reaching for an area that was, you know, all of the Poverty Bay Flats was once a swamp, essentially. So we're fortunate in that the plant cover is a feature. But if many of our areas weren't tile drained, they would be growing rushes and they would fit the definitions. So yeah, the implications are pretty huge for our region. Cheers.
Thank you. I'm just talking to councillors now, not staff. When you are in the meeting, I need you to have your video on. Otherwise, I do not know if you are here or not. So I don't know if you're present or not. No problem if you pop away to the bathroom or quickly grab a coffee, turn your video off then. Otherwise, I'm just not sure who's present or not, because you could have the screen and be away. Anyway, let's move on to, it was moved by Councillor Foster.
Sorry, Madam Chair, it was me.
Oh, it was you, Pat. Please go.
Thank you. I share a number of concerns that Councillor Worsnop's raised, and I think it is really confusing for the public, and I'd like to see, in response to Yannick's comments a moment ago, if we could actually organise ourselves to have a really good comms around it, because the farmers know that they've got PMS. Okay. Natural areas that are not PMSs, so that's another tranche of our vegetation, whatever. And then we're now looking into the wetland protections, and there's a really good picture on page 89 of our papers, and it shows a very typical gully. And if you and it would have once been a wetland, just like Awapuni Moana was a complete wetland. So we have to, you know, Māori landowners and general landowners are all going to be captured in this. So if you look at that picture on page 89 and think about how you would fence that, and then where the weeds would grow, because that's what I'm hot on. The more we ask landowners to fence off pieces of land for whatever reason, we end up with blackberry, pampas, and all sorts of other nasty weeds that do not grow in grazed pasture land, Cataniaster, and you only have to look at our roadsides to see what weeds will grow as soon as there's not livestock farming them. So what are we going to say? Then they become a habitat for pests. So we end up with mustelids and all sorts of other things that will live in those fenced off areas that cover vegetation. Wild cats, the things that town people liberate into the countryside when they don't want to get their cat destroyed in a humane way, they dump them out in the rural areas. So I just think that it's a pretty big piece of work. I completely understand that there are some requirements on us to do it. I appreciate what Yannick and the team are doing, but I think it would be helpful, and you did mention comms a moment ago, if we could actually show how these elements are all tied together and where the steps are. And I too am really concerned about what the implications are going to be. And then I suspect management are also concerned about what kind of monitoring and what is monitoring going to look like, and what is it going to capture? And are we then going to be hot on the weeds that are currently in our weed and pest management plan? We haven't got a dog show of managing the weeds that'll grow in any more protected areas. Then we're not good at managing them at the moment. So it's got huge cost implications, and not just for the landowners, but also for council to manage it. So I think it would be really helpful, and the paper's great, but if we could see some kind of timeline, A, a timeline, and B, how these link together, and then maybe have a mechanism that we give information on a regular basis to the Gisborne Herald. It'll print it on the farming pages. They're very happy to have information, a bit more explanation about what it is, and it's not all just on Facebook, please. So I appreciate what a challenge this is, but there are if there are supposedly 784 ostensible wetlands in the Motu catchment, that is an enormous number. And how they're now going to be ground truths, well, that comes at a big cost. So, how much money have we got sitting beside this in the annual plan? I haven't gone to look, but it is going to be a costly process too. So there are a lot of questions around it. It's really good to have it in front of us for a start, but I think we need to see what the work plan around it is and where the comms fit around that work plan, please.
Thank you. I'm just going to get Joe to respond, and then we move to Sandra. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Just to note, we do have a freshwater planning update due to come to Council on the 30th of September, so we can provide a bit more detail in that on the forward plan and the communication plan, if that would assist. And you're right, it is a massive job.
Thank you, that would be good. But can we then sort of build up some material that can be given to landowners and iwi, because our our iwi farming partners are going to have be affected by this as well, and not everybody, they'll read bits of our report, but if a comms plan can be built alongside it, which actually shows pictures like this, because that's what means a lot to people when they actually see a photograph that's capturing what we're talking about. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll note that for the comms plan. Thank you.
Okay, Sandra, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And you've actually just nailed exactly what I was about to talk about, because this is the overlap that the freshwater planning, all that work that was done leading into this, can be of assistance to us. I would love to think that we're not going to reinvent the wheel again, and we can go back to a lot of that work and bring it forward. That said, Pat and Kerry, I feel like I'm beating the same drum a wee bit. Pest control, weed control, health and safety issues. If you're looking at compliance officers on farm, there's a whole bunch of costs attached to this, not only to council, but to individual landowners as well, irrespective of their designation. So with that in mind, is it possible, and Yannick, I don't know if you've thought about it from this point of view or not, going back to Pat's comment around how we wrap the comms around this, is it possible yet, have we got enough people working in this space yet? And I'm talking about, some of the projects that are already underway, be they iwi driven or just community driven, smaller projects where you can actually start to cost proof this. What does it cost to maintain an area like this across a decade, for example? Because in that decade, you are going to strike all of these issues. Because whacking a fence up is a one-off cost. There is a whole bunch of costs attached to this, and quite often in a business environment where there's not necessarily any income per se. So I just wanted to, I know that sounds very granular and it sounds deeply economic, and it doesn't have all of the climate protection and you know, the environmental and social aspects of it. I know it's just coming at it from a purely economic process, but unfortunately it does cost to do all of these things. And if it's going to affect our landowners and it's going to affect council, perhaps it might be a really neat package to put together as part of the comms.
Through you, Madam Chair, we haven't done the economic analysis. That is something that would be hugely important for us to go forward, because I think we need to give this a bit of a reality check. At the very minimum as a basis for seeking further resourcing. Through government, I'm hoping will provide a little bit more clarity, and that was signalled a couple of weeks ago that they would be looking, at least through the policy statement for Indigenous biodiversity, to provide further resourcing support. And I think that's going to be a critical pathway for us as we start to give effect to the mapping exercise and go about implementing. But it's not something that we've undertaken ourselves as staff. Potentially it's something that we could engage a suitably experienced consultant to take a look at.
Thank you for that, Yannick.
Can I just
more questions?
Oh, am I able to just add in there?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, Madam
No,
Chair.
Abby. No worries.
I just wanted to address a couple of the councillor's concerns from a technical perspective. So, I mean, I guess Yannick's got his head all over the policy and implications. But from a technical perspective, I guess wetlands are quite complex, and fencing off permanently isn't always the best protection method or the best application. And I get Sandra, Pat, you've both raised that as an issue. And I guess even though for the motu work that we've done, a lot of the wetlands identified that may or may not, depending on ground truthing, meet the definitions under the NES freshwater, they wouldn't be something that we would consider needed to be fenced on a case-by-case basis, I suppose, because there isn't really any ecological gain from that. And you know, this is an incredibly complex process, and a lot of wetlands actually are better to remain unfenced ecologically and for biodiversity reasons. So even though this is going to be quite a long process, because we do have to go through the mapping process, but I think a lot of the desktop mapped wetlands that Morpham have identified will need to be ground truth, so we can see whether they actually meet the criteria, and then on a case by case determine what protection they need and whether that is a fencing option or not. And I think my point is that I understand that you know, the implications seem huge, and that I guess they don't necessarily have to be, but there's a lot of work to do to determine what is going to be best for each site. But also the other point was that as part of, you know, I'm on the National Biodiversity Working Group, and all councils are in the dark a little bit in terms of how to do this, undertake the mapping process and then the ground truthing process, and then what happens next. And so I think we're all in a bit of a position of not really knowing how this is going to work, and awaiting. There's a lot of promises for some national direction that we're all waiting on as well. So I guess that's something to take into account. Hopefully that was helpful. Thanks.
Thank you, Abby. Okay, councillors. So this is a noting paper, but like was alluded, it's more than a noting paper, but for today it is a noting paper. And I did have a mover. Larry moved it. Is there a seconder?
A second.
Thank you, Shannon. I think I spotted Shannon before. So hands up, all in favour? Contrary, it's carried. Thank you.
Okay, councillors, I now move that we include this agenda item, which was our late item on Three Waters, and seconded by Councillor Akwata Brown. So just all in favour, this is the late Three Waters paper. Thank you for that. All in favour? Yep, that's all good. So we're moving to our separate paper now, and I'm going to hand over to Nadine, who will guide us. Thank you, Nadine, for writing this paper. Lots of info in there that is good for us as a starting point. Obviously, we need heaps more. As councillors will see, yesterday and today, I wrote about this paper as a column to the Gisborne Herald, just to give people a little bit of, so I just took pieces from this paper, even though it was very difficult because it's so information dense, to put that into 600 word, was just giving the public a rough idea of where we are at and then our time frames. So Nadine, I'm going to hand over to you. Once you've spoken, we'll open the floor and we can discuss this paper. Thank you, Nadine.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. So yes, as you see, you've got the much anticipated report, which has been previously based on a template that our sector and Tairawhiti have come up with. So it's a good example of the sector can actually come together when they need to deliver. So just a reminder of the key points that are in there: $2.5 billion to support councils to transition to the new entities. It comprises a better off element, so no council should be worse off. And then they're injecting a better off funding allocation. Ours is $28.8 million, and that funding can be used to support the delivery of any local wellbeing outcomes, so not necessarily restricted to infrastructure, so it can cover things like climate change, etc. But there's an opt-in in terms of accessing that $28.8 million. Section 19 outlines our analysis in terms of the impacts financially and the internal impacts, as well as community interests. So just in terms of that, the key thing to note is that the estimates to meet future pressures in terms of their modelling, we would need to increase from $990 to an excess of $8,690, and so we've provided for you a picture, the graph of that snapshot, and you've all had access to that data. We do note in there around the anticipated transfer date being mid-2024, and the finance team have done some modelling in terms of the financial profile, so I'm sure you'll have some questions around that, but in summary, $327 million in assets, that's depreciated replacement cost, $140 million in revaluation reserves, and $26 million in revenue at that point. We also identify 5 options for you to consider, and at this stage, no decision is required on the future delivery arrangements, and you would have seen the legal advice around that, and we are suggesting that we wait until further information is available so we can undertake thorough consultation. We've also listed for you some concerns that need to be addressed, and you may also have others in the discussions that you would like either for myself or through Her Worship to pick up in further discussions with our GNZ and ministers, and that's in particular, we've pointed out boundaries, Wainaki and other transition issues. And there's obviously the integration with other reforms and the other massive work that's going on around there. So on that basis, I'll hand over back to you, Your Worship.
And I just wanted to say Donna will send out an invite to everyone soon. There is a Zoom Three Waters update, which is usually for mayors, chairs and chief executives, but Nadine did check and we are allowed to invite all councillors. So I will just quickly tell you what today, I will forward this to you as well. And today, this afternoon, the agenda is Jason will give an update on the proposed governance structures and community engagement mechanisms. and there's also people from Taumatu Arawai. So they usually talk for a little bit, and then there are heaps of opportunity for questions either through, usually we only listen in, and then later you can put your hand up. But please, councillors, make sure Donna has sent the whole series on. So it is Thursdays at 4 o'clock, just to see where Local Government New Zealand is. And that's usually led by Susan Freeman Green, who is the CEO of Local Government New Zealand. Okay, we're going to start. Sandra, Debbie, Larry, Shannon. Go, Sandra. Thank you.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for the report. It's fantastic to finally have something in a collated fashion that we can actually get our hands on. So that's the first thing. To the authors of it, thank you very much. I have a couple of questions that I just want to get my head around. You know, there is no decision to be made, as you say. It's just a case of where we go to from here. The first question that I've had all along, and which I'm looking at attachment 4, which is page 31 of the report, the 28.8 million that we have been allocated, that still comes, from what I can gather, and I may be wrong, and I'm hoping I'm wrong, but that still comes from us as a region, from the point of view of that it is not central government funding in its entirety. Could somebody please just clarify exactly what that breakdown is when it comes to $28.8 million, which is supposedly being injected into our region, but I suspect it's probably not that figure.
Is that the, sorry, my laptop's playing up, but so no, that's new money that's being made available to all councils. So that's set up on regional basis. Sorry, and that's in your attachment there that lists it. So your question, if it's going to be reappropriated from existing council expenditure.
Well, it's well, as I say, it seems like that central government is talking about putting in an allocation of part of that 500 million, of which our amount is 2.8 mil. Sorry, 28.8 mil. So you're saying that this is all new money. It's not going to come from the sector, because at some point it says something about the fact that it's going to come from sector entities. And if we become part of a sector entity, do we not become part of the money that's getting paid back to ourselves?
Can you point whereabouts is that on the report?
I'm just, it's all on page 31. I'll come back to it and find it. I didn't want to hold everybody up. I'll come back and find it for you, Nadine. I'll flick you a message.
Nadine, I had a similar question just now that Sandra has spoken, where I listened to a specialist expert on Radio New Zealand who spoke about why the government wanted to get their fingers on Three Waters. It was just very interesting talk. And he highlighted, and I was going to ask that out of that 2.5 billion, the first billion is being paid by the government, but then the 1.5 billion is money that the entities, the four entities would pay. So that would mean the money comes from us because we are that entity, or we are a part of that entity.
Yeah, essentially, essentially it would be. So the first tranche of it is the better off, and that it's encouraging councils use their reserves as well to fund anything, because essentially they'll be taking the activity off our balance sheet. But by effect, indirectly, you would assume, yes, it does come from that entity once you're all joined up.
Okay. Yeah. So that's basically my question, is whether, I mean, there's a sleight of hand happening here that I just wanted to make sure that we're very aware of. This doesn't come free. This is not new money to our district, in actual fact.
Okay. Next is Debbie. Just Debbie, before you go, I'm just going to read Andy's question because otherwise I'm going to forget. With the 26 million loss in revenue, is that all balanced with a reduction in expenses to gain that revenue, Nadine?
What was, sorry, can you repeat the question?
Or Pauline, with the 26 million loss in revenue that we are going to experience if we hand over our assets, because we won't be getting any revenue there. Is that at all balanced with a reduction in expenses to gain that revenue at all?
So that's Pauline will jump in on that, but in terms of that, the revenue will have a direct impact on our ability to pay, or our debt capacity of the council. Sorry, Pauline, I can't see you on my screen.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Pauline.
Yeah, free worship. The revenue that is saying in there is mostly the rates requirement. So basically it's net of expenditure and income. So yes, our expenditure would be reduced accordingly as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, now we go back to Debbie, Larry, Shannon. Thank you. Just need to unmute. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the report in front of us so that we can learn a bit more and discuss this. I've got tons of things, marks on my agenda, but on the 40, it says there's a part there talking about, oh, sorry, point 40 on page 10 talks about this means we'd be expected to be reimbursed up to 41.3 million from the Crown. Is that a reality?
Free worship. Sorry, if Nadine, I'll just pop in with regards to it. It's been stated to us that the debt that councils have as at the time of the transfer that occurs, it hasn't actually been defined as such, but they have indicated that will be taken into account, and as such we would be expecting to have that repaid to us.
Okay, thank you for that. And if I can just move to in those list of risks, which is point 143. No, it's not. Yes, it is. Sorry, I've just got so many marks that yeah, it's page 24, 22 and 23. Sorry. And so there's a lot of risks to consider, and I just wonder, most of those risks are council related, and I guess that's what we care about, but also we care about our community, and there's lots of risks for the community and our future community, our grandchildren and their grandchildren, and what they potentially might lose. And I just wonder if there's any way to add that into the risks that we're looking at. And I think that my biggest concern is around the consultation that we're not allowed to have yet, because on one hand the government claims it's too early for councils to ask ratepayers whether they should consider giving away their water assets, and on the other hand, in an act of eye-watering hypocrisy, communities are being bombarded with a $3.5 million tax-funded propaganda campaign aimed at undermining public confidence in council water management. I just don't think we should allow ourselves to be bullied and or discredited by the government. And I think I really feel that we need to make a stand. And I think that the community has a right to know and have a voice. And I think that a referendum really is the only way for them to, you know, it's such a huge issue. And it just feels like everything's sliding away from underneath us. And I don't understand why the government doesn't want councils to consult, although I have read all this and I see it, but it still, it irks me. And that's all I needed to say. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Debbie. We move on to Larry.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you. Look, I have mentioned it to most that I did watch that webinar the other week, and I know that right from the start we've all been very resistant to this the whole move, and all the different implications there are for the community. But when you look at the future and the future projected impacts of water infrastructure for all communities in New Zealand, and I'm thinking of our one here as well. And after listening to that webinar, you know, I had a slight shift of acceptance, and I'm not saying that I'm open to the proposal or anything like that, but it's all information gathering. And I think it's really important for councillors, if you didn't see that webinar, to go back and have a look at it and just see what the local government New Zealand is promoting, and the all the different questions and answers that were asked by the 250 odd councillors that did listen to that webinar, because it was actually really informative, I thought. And my attitude, I'm actually a little bit more open than what I previously was, when I was kind of quite staunch and resistant to this change. So it's all about the benefit of the future of the community and the management of our water. But I'm certainly looking for more information, and I'm reading through this report and seeing that there's actually probably been a little bit of a shift in our staff's attitude to this whole scenario as well. So I'm kind of looking at it at a generic state at this stage. But the other one question I have got is that Hawke's Bay are really promoting this, and we're now saying that there's a possibility that we could have a CCO with Hawke's Bay and iwi. And I'm looking at this thinking, well, actually, have we even consulted with Hawke's Bay to see if that's the scenario? Because from what I hear from that webinar in particular, they are really backing this whole proposal, particularly being from Havelock, and that being the start of this whole conversation. So yeah, that's me at this stage. But I think I would recommend, and if there are any other webinars, which I think there are, that everyone has a look and checks them out, because it's actually, you've got to look at all the different sides and weigh up what's beneficial for our region. So I would recommend that.
Good. And yes, this afternoon at 4, no one's busy, everyone's at home. So we'll see each other there. And Kerry, Shannon, and then Pat.
Thank you. So I just wanted to, so I've got a question around, I can't tell any difference between status quo and do nothing. So I'm presuming that those options must have something different about them that I don't recognise from the paper. But clearly, to a certain extent, those are not really options anyway, because neither of them fit with the increase in service delivery that is required via the water services bill and all the rest. So I do appreciate the fact that we're being presented with options, but I think to a certain extent they're not all actual options, given what's on the table and the government's clear direction. I just a couple of things in terms of what I think I need to understand. Do we agree with the $2.7 billion that, or the $70,000 per connected person that the government is using for our figures? If we're saying we had planned to invest 600 million, do we agree that the difference of 1.8 billion is genuinely needing to be spent? And if we do agree with that figure, do we also agree that those assumptions are simply based on the 14,000 connections that we currently have, or are those assumptions including further connections? And because obviously the reason we need to identify this is because if we do agree with the $2.7 billion necessary to fund water infrastructure in this region, then we do not have the ability to leverage to the extent that is necessary to deliver that. If, however, we think that our numbers are robust, then in fact we do, and we have a different set of options in front of us, and actually some of these options remain options as opposed to being ruled out. So that's something that I can't tell from the paper, and I'd like that filled in. Yeah, that's probably my main question at this point.
Thank you,
Sorry,
Kerry.
I might either Pauline or Dave to respond with that, because I'm working with the numbers.
If you wish, I can do, and then Dave can actually plot in for a different point of view. So you're quite right. That was the first things when we were looking at the modelling that they actually did and the assumptions that they made for us. We were trying to test it, and the 2.7 billion seemed to be a significant investment that we would have to be making. And the assumptions of the modelling that they actually had was 14,000 connections. That said that there would be 2.7 head of populations, therefore they got to 37,000 people of population. That was the basis of needing the $2.7 billion worth of investment. So in terms of that, we tested against the other unitaries, where they were in terms of their overall assets, and that was mostly Nelson, Marlborough, and Tasman. Nelson has the highest investment in terms of assets in the three waters. Nelson is the lower, but we have the lowest. So there is a significant difference that we actually have compared to them. So in that then tested to see, well, where were they are at in terms of their investment portfolio. So Tasman, for argument's sake, they're about 2.1 billion. But even if we said that the assumptions were high, and that's 300% or whatever that we needed to do about a 1.2 billion, our cost that we would be paying per ratepayer, which currently is 900, would go far in excess of what they are projecting of the free water reforms. It would go at least to what, say, Nelson is just under 6,000. So even if it was half of that, you're talking about 3,000 or 4,000, which is significantly more than what they're saying with reforms would be. And so we did test that, and even though the investment, as say, might be too high, it still says if you take all other scenarios and take it at a much lower cost of even 1.2 billion, which is double what we've got, we're still in a situation which will be far higher than what it would be without the reforms.
Can Pauline tell us what was going to be done for that $1.2 million? What was actually going to change?
So you mean what we would model? What we would be?
What you were going to spend it on?
Oh, so I'm just saying what would be the level of investment that you would need to do. So we assume in our long-term plan that we would be doing about 370 odd million in that over that 50 years. But could we be doing more? And that question is that yes, we probably could, and Dave can answer that far better than me. But there may be other things that could have been taken into account, such as is there growth capacity in the wastewater treatment plant? Is there other growth pipes connections with it? Is there reticulated to the other services with Wainui where we're at capacity? So there are a significant amount of investments that you could actually achieve in it. But the assumption is not that of what we could do or what we have. It is saying that best practice from international case studies is saying that is what you need to actually have where you need to be. So that's the point of difference of what we're saying that we could do, but it's not the question is where should we be compared to others in international case studies.
So sorry, just back to the questions that you didn't quite get to, Pauline. So if I take your Wainui example, that does assume further connections over and above the 14,000, which you're saying is not currently factored into the 600 odd million that we had planned for the next, by 2050 or whenever. Is that right?
And Dave could be able to say there was a $60 million worth of investment in infrastructure 30 years What that was made up of, I'm not particularly sure, but Dave can actually answer what are the actual investments that were required for that.
The fundamental difference that we can see when we look at the numbers for what are proposed from the Three Waters reform and what we have in both your LTP and our asset management plans is the pace of change in the renewals that they would fund versus what we would fund. So you know that we have 54 kilometres of clay pipe that we know needs to be replaced. We only do it at 1.5 k's per year. They're saying, well, actually, we would speed that up with the economy of scale and delivery that we've got. They would also do more of what we have in our asset management plan than what we have been able to afford through the long-term plan. Remember, in our long-term plan, we've pushed out some of the big infrastructure spending that we know we're going to need eventually. So that's the next dam, which we know we're going to need more water storage within our region, but then also looking at our renewals pipelines. So that's not including large extensions. It's looking at how do we actually get everybody up to the same standard. So replacing some of our water delivery pipes sooner than what we had proposed in the long-term plan, and actually delivering the full asset management plan that's needed there at the moment.
Okay, thank you for that, Dave. I'm going to ask Meredith, have you spoken before? Okay, Meredith, and then anyone else? Larry, I see.
I haven't spoken yet. I just asked a question. Thanks.
Have you already asked?
No, I would like to speak after Meredith, please, because I only asked a question then.
Okay. So Meredith, Pat, Shannon. Yes.
Kia ora koutou. My two big, I guess, overwhelmingly, we're in a space of a big work program, having just done all our long-term plan consultations and all that work that has happened there, and staff, you know, have been working tirelessly in these spaces. So their commitment to more work, you know, it's another lot of expectations. So this is a big decision. Like, I feel like, again, I'm intrigued to know if governments have just been collating data for years from councils asking for more funds regarding infrastructure, and have just come together with this being the big reform to meet that need or that asking for years and years. I hear what Councillor Gregory is saying in that regard to us as locals who live in our region, and our responsibility to make the best decisions on behalf of our ratepayer, who has been funding through their rates these assets, etc. So it's a big decision, and I know time constraints and all those factors, but it's a conversation that's just not that. It overwhelms me when I read a little bit more. I got to listen to the Prime Minister's sales pitch at the local government conference. It was very, very solid, as anyone would expect. If you're going to do this, you want to make sure you're selling it right. Of course, the opposition spoke to it quite well too, regarding concerns about localism, local democracy, and democracy overall. The boundary issue, I've heard from Māori that they'd prefer to go north with regard to Apanui and into that space, and there wasn't really a lot of conversation, it seemed, to the regional four unitary or four groups that were created by government, and that frustrates me when we've just had this huge debate regarding Māori wards, and regions have been debating this discussion, and now all of a sudden a bigger decision is on the table that seems to just dismiss the discussions around Māori wards and Māori representation, and better and fairer representation at that. So that frustrates me. The treaty partnership role that we play in respect to this whole decision-making process. So I appreciate there's a lot of data you've given us. Thank you, Pauline, for your conversation, to the financials, etc. Always appreciate it. But this isn't just economics. I know that's a huge part of it, but its cultural and its social impacts are huge too. And I don't like it when I feel uncomfortable personally when we are debating something in that asset-based infrastructure economics, when it has a lot more covering off, with all due respect. I think this requires us to, really not just push back. I don't think it's just about being resistant for the sake of it. It's absolutely one of the biggest decisions that's in my time as a governor of my region. And I'm being asked a lot of questions about, seeing the best for region. That no one will lose in this space. We know our pipes are old, need changing. We need to collect more rainwater. So much in this. And so I guess my 2 cents today is that I'm not in a position where I feel compelled to just say, let's pursue the positives that this is all about, because that's not good decision making. We should be looking at all the risks it incurs. We should be looking at our region's voice strongly and hearing from our region and understanding implications for the future, for our mokopuna especially. So for me today, thank you for the paper. Thank you for, it's another adage. I have sat through the webinars. Thank you, Larry, for promoting this. Let's get as much information as we can so we can be well informed in our decision-making process. But now, I don't think it covers off enough of the cultural and social aspects that I believe water and wastewater and any water in region is about. There's more to this than meets the eye, and this government is pushing on transform, but I think reform more and more. And we have to do this right, because it's our role to make the best decisions. So reading lots, and appreciate the paper. Thank you to everybody that's given their time into this space. But I have concerns that have been raised by everyone today, and still want to consider it, and we need to talk some more. So it ain't over till the fat lady sings. I've got a song lined up, but I think it's important that we don't rush or feel rushed. It's our place. It's our whānau, our hapu, our iwi, and it's our water. Kia ora.
Thank you. Okay, we go on to Shannon. Thank you, Shannon. And then it's Pat.
Thank you. Yeah, so I had a couple of things to add to the kōrero. Yeah, as Meredith just touched on as well, I don't see a lot of evidence that government has given effect to Te Tiriti o Waitangi in the development of their preferred option. I know that it's gone out to consultation, and now they're and now those conversations are being had, but it doesn't seem like a partnership has been formed to get to this stage. It seems very much a set of options that have come out of a boardroom somewhere. Also, in lieu of a work plan that explains that what that money is going to be spent on, they proposed $2.3 billion or whatever it was that they're factoring. It would be good to get a very clear level of service statement that gave us an idea of what to expect from this partnership, or from this change of governance of it. There's a couple of things that I'd really like to seek clarity on. For example, the commitments in our wastewater consent for best endeavours to remove wastewater from the bay. If this organisation has far greater financial capacity and far greater borrowing capacity, then the primary restriction for us not achieving removal of wastewater from the bay is removed, and therefore the burden on them would be to remove it. So their best endeavours would be to go forward and remove it because of because they don't have the same affordability issue that we have. So yeah, I'd like to see where that falls in this conversation, and what their intentions would be around recycled water and repurposing it. It's an expense we can't afford, but they can. And then considering the high quality of service we currently provide in the water and wastewater area, which has come at a big debt to our community over quite some time. That's all been funded at the expense of other projects for our community. That's been funded and has been a burden on our community for more than just this conversation. It begs the question that with this new money that has been provided to us, do we generate new projects or accelerate some of the nice to haves, or do we actually be more sensible with it and understand that we can use it to pay down our debt with another tranche of debt funding to come when they take our water debt. So use it not for water debt, but use it for other debt in our council. You know, we could come out of this in not just an enviable position in our balance sheet, but we could be eliminating a great quantity of debt out of our community, which would have a direct result of reducing rates across the board and continuation of affordability. I don't think we should just be excited that we've got some money and going out and spending it. There may be better ways to see long-term benefits.
Thank you for that, Shannon. We've got Pat, and then we have Isaac.
Right, thank you. And my question was further to what David was speaking to us about before, Mr. Wilson. Do we realistically think that all that additional work would be able to be completed? And it really applies right across New Zealand too, because we all, I mean, look at the building industry can't get what it needs right now. So they're saying that, you know, we can all do more of this work. But in real terms, is small Tairawhiti on the edge of the North Island going to be at as much priority in the government spend and the actual delivery as bigger centres? I doubt it. So I'd be interested in maybe, David's not on the call now, I don't think, but maybe Pauline can tell us whether we think we'd have the capacity to do more, because sometimes we do struggle to have the capacity in people to undertake the work if there was more work, if there was more money. So that's one question.
Thank you, Pat. Pauline?
Oh, sorry.
Indeed, probably far better.
Yeah, just in terms of that, if the whole proposal is based on efficiency gains and achieving good outcomes. So, I mean, that's the $1 million question really, is like, so is what is being proposed going to deliver the intended outcomes that has been promoted here? And based on our current challenges around recruitment and being able to have skilled people and delivery of Three Waters and technicians, that's difficult to say that. So should we stand up in 2024, everything's going to be wonderful and we're going to have the capacity to deliver on all the region's needs. That being said, they're also saying, however, is that once you kind of move into amalgamation, you get that benefit of scale and you're able to transfer the talent within the entities around to be able to deliver in regions. So smarter procurement and purchasing powers that large scale entities have. So I mean, I think it's a difficult one there, Councillor Seymour. The benefits, the anticipated benefits, is that there will be more jobs in region, higher paid jobs as well, and a greater level of service to the community. But again, that's the intended outcomes, and whether that comes into fruition is only a wait and see, really.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Supplementary to that, I completely agree with Debbie, and many people are fed up with that low-level information that's on television. That, it treats everybody like we're kids at primary school, and I think it's really people are thinking it's just a whitewash. One thing that seems to have disappeared is the any comment around the issue of 2 or more supplies needing to be regulated, and that was one thing that we did raise. I do want to thank staff for this report and actually getting it all into one place so we can read it. Great that the Mayor has made a paper available made comment available to the Gisborne Herald, because the public do feel a bit at a loss. So do we know what's happened to the regulation around even just provision of water to 2 households becoming a regulated supply? Can anyone answer that?
I'll have to come back to you unless there's someone else from Dave's team online that I can't see on my screen.
Yep, that's fine. I'll just leave that as a question. And then the further question around, and I think the comments that have been made and the recommendations are great in the matter around potential land ownership of the Wainaki block, and does that include all of the work that's been being done by the local community out there? What does that mean? Because those hillsides are actually a part of the protection of the dam. So, and then what covenants are there over the land that the pipeline travels across? Because there are covenants on private land where our water supply pipeline travels across, I suspect. And then the last question, which I really did want an answer to, or if not, can we have a paper in the future? What does it mean for the work that we're planning right now on the wastewater upgrade? Because we've got commitments, we've bought some product and some of the kit, if you like, to build that next stage of our wastewater treatment plant. And if this is going to come into effect in 2024, you know, what are we saying about the implications of this proposal on our wastewater treatment plant? And that goes back to some of the comment Councillor Dowsing made, but the actual construction, the work that we're doing with the engineers, and maybe we can have a paper on that. And the last thing, of course, is that money that was meant to be available for community well-being. What do we think we might be going to do with that, if that's still going to be available? And maybe even a further update on where we are with the $11 million spend that we were looking at, something for Ruatoria, and some part of that being used in the city. So there's several questions in there, but I think it's all part of the bigger picture of our community, the wastewater, clean water, fresh water that we provide to our communities, and we councillors are responsible for knowing that information.
Yeah, so if I can, through your worship, hopefully I'll pick up all the questions. So in terms of the Waiaki, I think we've signalled in there that's where we need further clarity around what this might mean for land transfer, if any. So that is a significant issue that we will need to get further detail on. In terms of the work that's happening right now in the wastewater treatment plant, next week we had scheduled to provide an update on the wastewater treatment plant progress. So Becca will be in attendance in that, and so we can address the transition issues that, so say council opts in, there'll be a transition phase that would need to work through, so we can address that question in the update next week at council. In terms of the money for the community or the other projects, so the $28 million Better Off injection, that so the expectations, as I understand, is that we would engage with iwi and community as to how we would spend that. So there is no, at this stage, we've got nothing that we have allocated that to without having actually a further conversation around, are you opting in, and then if you're opting in, what does this look like in terms of the $28 million?
And the thank you for that. And just supplementary, and that 11 million, can we have an update on that too, please? Maybe next time.
Yes. Yep. I'll let Dave know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Isaac, then Josh, then Terry, then Tony.
Yeah, just a couple of things. First thing was just the second Councillor Gregory and Councillor Seymour in terms of the ad. Thanks to the lockdown, I had the first chance to watch TV for a while. I saw the ad for the first time, and yeah, it was very patronising. And it's a bit frustrating that that information is getting out there, but we can't counter it, especially since this is the one issue that I've had the most feedback from ratepayers on. I don't think I've got any emails about a single issue in my time in council. So I guess as a council, it comes down to cost of compliance versus autonomy if it's not compulsory in the first instance. And even if it's not compulsory, they could make it virtually compulsory through cost of compliance. So then that's a decision for the ratepayers to make, really, not whether they're willing to pay that extra to have that autonomy. The other thing I just didn't know whether we had any feedback on is if there's a change of government in 2023, where does that leave this project? Because I was just curious about that.
Thank you for that, Isaac. And yes, in that column that I wrote yesterday and today, you will see there's still big chatter amongst mayors and understanding that at the end of September, the government might come out and say this is compulsory because they are doing all their calculations on economies of scale. If not everyone has opted in, the numbers fall apart. So there's also that wait and see option there. While we ask our questions, there will be announcements at the end of September.
Yeah. Does the CE, do we have any understanding about if there's a change of government, what will happen to this project? Have there been any provisions for that?
No, I dare not speculate, Councillor Hughes, on whether there might be a change of government or not. And I assume that they will be working on the basis that they will be able to see this through.
Thank you. We go to Councillor Wharehanger, then Sheldrake, Robinson, Warsnop.
Go ahead, Uncle Bill.
Thank you, Your Worship. Interesting conversation. Would someone please send me a copy of that report so I can know what I'm talking about? I'll leave you now with this. Better the devil we know than the devil we don't. Hooray, everyone.
Or did he also just hang up?
Yes.
Okay. No, that's all good. Yeah, that report is on Docs on Tap, and I can.
But if our computers aren't working in the country regularly, it is quite hard to access information. I mean, I could print mine from my ordinary email, thanks Riet, because someone sent it to me. Can I just mention, seeing I'm talking, I've just downloaded on my iPad, and that Zoom meeting invitation is actually for Thursday next week, unless I can't read it properly.
Pat, there's one that happens every Thursday, so just take a quick look to see if it's in your calendar for today as well, because Donna sent you the link so it goes into your calendar every Thursday. Just quickly check if it's there for today as well.
She has sent it to us. She has sent us the link. Yep, was that Thursday the 19th?
Yeah,
Thursday.
So, yes, and then it will go in every Thursday after that. So it's a recurring.
Thank
link.
you.
No worries. Okay, we move on to Councillor Sheldrake.
Yeah, thank you. And I totally concur with all the comments and how we'd get answers to all these questions. I don't know, but I do note that this is a noting paper. To me, the more I listen and hear, I sort of feel it's a fait accompli with this government. And I really wonder, the 28 million just seems such a small amount of money. So I think we're just going to get put in a corner ultimately, and they're going to try push this through. So agree with the conversation, the unanswered questions, and how you get answers to all of them. I don't know, but just the way it's going, and absolutely agree with the advertising on the TV, very condescending.
So Terry, I wanted to mention way back, there was even worse, even a worse campaign they ran, and there was a big outcry towards local government saying it's in poor taste and it makes us look like the losers, and the government riding in to save people from black showers. And anyway, so they apologized and said they will tweak it. Well, the tweaked version is just as bad.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's my 5 cents on this.
Thank you for that, Terry. I'm going to move to Tony. Tony, when you're there, please have your camera on so I can know you're in the meeting. And then Kerry, thank you.
I went to the bathroom, Madam.
Oh,
Chair.
how many times can one go to a bathroom?
Is it a competition? Terry, in relation to your concerns, nobody puts baby in a corner, mate. So we've got your back. The thing, the part of this whole corridor that I'm not really hearing addressed is actually iwi positions and iwi consultation. In light of the Waitangi Tribunal white paper on water, in light of the action we have in the court with our own entity, and in light of some of the positions our iwi partners have said to date. So the government will do what the government's going to do, but I'm really concerned that about our pathways for engaging and understanding our iwi partners' positions on this. It may be I'm simply just not picking it up, but Madam CEO, can you just elicit some more on this, please?
Yes, through your worship. So at a national level, that's what we've been asking frequently in terms of where iwi are sitting in this particular issue. And we have raised it at some of the webinars also that we've had with Department of Internal Affairs. And it's been quite a mixed response, and Councillor Stotts, Mayor Stotts will be able to endorse that from her engagements as well. At a local level, through the Rautipu Order governance group, we did mention that the Brian Hanna and the gentleman Ben attended that hui, and the iwi chairs were able to ask questions, and that's where the comment came in terms of whether there's better alignment with another entity that would go around to whānau Apanui way, but nothing really formal in the sense of what the position, the collective position is there. I did take on board, however, at the last council committee meeting that we had, Councillor Faulkner's request of us to try and arrange a meeting, a hui together to get some so kind of a collective view for the region. So that's still on our to-do list.
And what I also wanted to add to that, Tony, it was only, so even though there have been discussions for the last couple of years, you know, the first tranche was last August, it was only at the local, just before the local government conference that the entities was announced. So that was the first real announcement. Before that, it was just talking about maybe what we are looking at. So once we've had the boundaries, and then the Prime Minister announced more funding at the local government conference, which is a month ago, it's only then that there's something to talk about. So our iwi partners are just as in the dark as we are. They have, so the information we have now are council specific stuff. But when Brian, Hannah and Ben came to council 2 weeks ago, and then afterwards they met with Rautipu Raora, that was the first time that there was really something to talk about, because up to now it's been really vague information. And so I'm concerned that we are given such a short time frame going forward to have these discussions. I know we don't have to publicly consult before the end of September. It's just for us to have these questions answered. But I question the fact that we have such short time frames to try and get our heads around all the information supplied, get more information, discuss it with our iwi partners, form a collective view, discuss it with our community, form a collective view, and then go out. So I'm really concerned about the timeframes put down. There's a big pushback, and today you'll see again when you log on to that webinar, other councils are just as in the dark as we are. We've only had a month of real information to work with, and even then there are quite a few holes still.
I guess, Madam Chair, it was more to do with actually understanding our iwi partners' position on actual water as a taonga under the treaty, and their views on potentially ownership and management, which is a fundamental more than simply what we're talking about with the Three Rivers reform, but of course it all forms part of it. And it would seem that we really haven't had those conversations with them. I have some understandings from some of my discussions with people that there are particular views and positions that may not be publicly shared at this point, or maybe not strongly voiced. And I guess at some point we're going to hear it, aren't we?
Yeah, and it's good to get those views out there. Just saying again, it's difficult for our iwi partners who are already engaged in so many different kaupapa that the government want their input in, that if it's DII has not made it easy for our iwi partners to get even the most basic information so that they then can talk about ownership, because they do not know what is being proposed. So I think
Madam
that
Chair,
is
were you able to raise those? Were you able to express even half of that in the paper that you wrote, or the articles you've written for the paper?
So what you will see today is that I have written little basic information out of this paper, but I made it clear that, so I did not write a lot about consultation with iwi. It was more just basic facts. But I did say to our community, we will talk to you once we have the information. So I, in both yesterday and today, said, once we have the information, our community and our iwi will have time to input.
But you didn't say it's a short time frame.
No, I don't think, I'll go back, but I don't think I did. Kerry.
Hey. Yep. Thanks. Excuse me if my computer gave up. Am I clear?
All good. There's a bit of a breakup now, Kerry, or is it my internet?
I'll call her and put her on the phone.
Okay. Anyone else wants to speak?
Hopefully.
Kerry,
Okay.
Kerry, you just need to quickly stop.
Can you not hear me?
You're breaking up. Just start again. Okay, we will get Sandra to ring you on the phone and then you can talk via Sandra's phone. It might be, the reception might be, phone reception might be better than the internet at this stage. The whole world is on Zoom calls at this time of day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, you just wait. I'm just going to mute you while you wait for Sandra to. There we go.
Yeah, go for it, mate.
Okay, thanks. So probably two things in that. Larry mentioned that the last Zoom meeting gave him some reassurance. I think what it did for me was it clarified the areas that LGNZ has not been able to resolve, and I think we need to highlight those because essentially accountability for communities is still largely absent from all the information that we have. We have no mechanism and no indication of how there will be a mechanism to provide any certainty around costs. And I think just using broad brush average numbers is massively unhelpful because it's unlikely that this entity is going to adhere to those numbers. They're going to apply whatever it costs to run the business divided by whoever they're supplying it to. So that's probably my first point, is that we cannot tell our community what this is likely to cost, and there is still no intention to supply really transparent, I guess, way of communicating how the costs will be arrived at and what potentially the corridor of likely costs might be, which I think there needs to be. I think that the assumption that 9,000 extra people can be employed and GDP increased via something that is entirely derived of debt and rates ignores who is paying for that debt and rates, and it's the community. If people get to keep their money and they similarly deploy these funds in service of their own businesses, their own lives, that also contributes to GDP and employment. So the idea that we're going to have more GDP from this entity using funds that come from the community is a complete farce. That GDP will have eventuated over that period of time anyway if that money is available in the community to be used. So I'm very sceptical of the way some of the information has been pulled together and given to councils. They're essentially looking for every lever to hang the reforms on that they can find, even though some of it just step up in economics 101 sense. For me, I don't think there's anything stopping us consulting with our community. We may not need to, but we hear time and again that we don't do things purely because we need to or that some statute says we have to. We should be consulting with our community now. We are being asked to make decisions within the next month based on the information that we have, which is not enough. Why on earth would we use lack of information as a reason for our community not to be part of the conversation? We've got no more information really than they do. I think that if my inbox is anything to go by, and you'll probably all be the same, people desperately want us to start asking them and providing what we've got and getting a sense of where people think we should be moving. I agree that iwi probably do not have enough of an idea of sort of what role they can play, but on the counter to that is our community have been explicitly excluded up until now, both Māori who are not affiliated to an iwi and everybody else. So to presume that we, simply because we're elected, intuitively know exactly what our communities want on something that was not an issue and not flagged prior to us being elected, that's just playing wrong. We do need to seek a mandate for our community, from our community, I should say. And I think that we should proceed to do that as soon as we can, basically now, really. That's all from me. Cheers.
Thank you, Kerry. Okay, so councillors, I don't see any other hands. I have a page full of recommendations in front of us, so I'm not going to read them all out, but you can see it is our staff requesting more information. Nadine, I have one question of you. Obviously, we are asking these questions of the government. You and I will talk to our Hawke's Bay mayors in the next week or so. We'll see where our lockdown is going in 25 minutes. And but the other stuff, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is all just straightforward stuff. 7, can you give us a timeline, Nadine? Because like I said, we have short time frames. Before we know it, it's going to be end of August, and we are expected to be in some sort of position to speak to the government at the end of September to raise how we feel, what we're feeling. I heard what Kerry earlier said, we should be talking to our community. How do you see this rolling out time-wise, Nadine?
So the intention is that we will be having a decision report in September because, as you pointed out, Your Worship, that's the time frame within which we need to be working towards. However, at the same time, we understand that by the end of September, we also may have a decision made on whether it's mandatory or not. So we are going to continue to work towards the September timeframe and gather further information that we can to try and paint a better picture and raise the issues that we've noted in the report part, plus the additional ones that have been discussed during this council meeting. And hopefully by the time, and I don't have the date in front of me in terms of the council meeting, or that we have scheduled for September, we will have the answers there. So there will be a decision that will be made around whether to opt in or not.
30th of September is our council.
Yes. Okay, cool. And in between that time, we will need to have further meeting with iwi. We will need to be thinking about the socialisation or what information we are providing to our community based on the information that we've currently got and that we're awaiting for as well.
So may I ask how we sometimes do when we talk about the representation review or other big issues, that we put a one-pager in the Gisborne Herald or something like that, where we just say, this is what's being proposed. Look, we're in an entity C with 22 other councils. This is the impact for us. These are the options we are. So just a very basic, I don't know if that's something we can do in the next week or so and get it out there.
I think it's something that the sector should do because otherwise we end up, just like we did with this model report, we all end up spending hours doing reports that are all going to be the same. So this is one example where we've been able to come together as a sector and do something as a collective. And so I do think it's on the sector as a whole because essentially the proposal's the same. Options available to councils are very similar. What's unique about this is our individual financial impacts.
And that's what our public would be after, though, to be able to weigh that up.
Yeah.
So can I ask you, as our CEO, to get your sector partners to get that sorted, to see if they're going to do something. If they are not, we need to do something ourselves. And I would hope we can, because it will be a visual, something visual with some information, nothing major, even just as a start saying, this is what's being proposed, timeframes, the financial impacts. I do think it's very important now that we've got this paper. I've written 2 columns just with the information of this paper, get something that's easy to process and let people know we will talk to them after September announcements.
Yeah, sure. And so what I'll do is I'll raise it with so we'll have a 3 water steering group operationally, and if there's no appetite to do that way, then we'll pull one together.
Thank you for that.
And one other point in that is that such a substantial part of our district is not reticulated. And so I think it needs to capture what it means or doesn't mean for our non-reticulated population. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Mr. Robinson.
What I was going to say was that if we do that, Madam Chair, that we just need to be really cautious of using neutral language and not be seen to be predetermining anything in our positioning or our language, given this is meant to be an ongoing process.
Thank you for that. Okay, so I have recommendations on page 3. Do I have a mover for them? Thank you, Shannon. Do I have a seconder for them? Thank you, Larry. All in favour, hands up. Against? Thank you, councillors, carried. Okay, my dear friends, we have sat down quite a substantial amount of hours this morning. Go and grab a cup of tea. The Prime Minister will be talking to all of us at 1 o'clock. Please make sure you look after yourself. Please shout out if you are aware of people in our community that might need some TLC, or we might need to reach out to, no, Tony, you do not need TLC, who might need some food support or anything. I know at this stage, our civil defence are not in a position to do that, but we can still refer people to food banks. We don't want anyone in our community to not know there is help available. Look after yourselves. Thank you so much for your time and energy. Our next meeting, so hopefully I see most of you 4 o'clock. I will go back, Pat, and send that background paper. I think it was only that small email, though, that she wrote that I just read out to say what will be discussed today, but I'll go and check that. Then our next get-together, we've got a nice long weekend. Our next get-together would then be next Thursday. My gut feeling is that we will, even if they move us out of level 4, we will only go to level 3. I can't see us moving from level 4 to 1. So I think we need to brace ourselves for the next while that we will be online. But let's see, listen at 1 o'clock, and then the Prime Minister will let us know tomorrow. Thank you so much for your time, Nadine. Thank you for you and your team, Michelle, Joe, Heather, Donna, everyone, Coral behind the scenes, Pauline. Thank you. Ka kite, and we'll catch up soon.